Useless ancient instincts we all still have. As much as we like to believe that as a species we are civilized and technologically advanced, in reality, a lot of modern day society and our day-to-day life is still heavily influenced and, quite honestly, controlled by primal instincts, deeply ingrained in our brains over hundreds of thousands of years of human development. But in this video, we're going to discuss examples of primal instincts that were helpful at the time that today are quite useless or, in some cases, making our lives harder. Let's get started. I would guarantee that most people watching this video, if not everybody watching this video, enjoys a sweet treat. And while some of us enjoy a sweet treat guilt-free, some of us also feel bad that we quite often crave such sugary things that we know aren't good for us. But the reason most of us crave such sugary and sweet foods and drinks was at one point in time crucial for our survival. During the ancient prehistoric days of humanity, food was a luxury and likely the most valuable currency. And it's for that reason that humans were really eating anything and everything they could get their hands on. But not all foods are built the same. Eating bugs and leaves is cool, but nothing quite hits the spot to a caveman like something extremely sweet or something extremely fatty. And the reason for this is simple. Sugar specifically is extremely valuable to the body because it gives your body a quick boost of energy, something that many foods aren't able to provide. And because of this, your body responded extremely positive to this food source that was able to give you such a quick hit of energy. Even if your body wasn't in dire need of energy at the time, your body is able to store that excess energy in the form of fat, meaning that at any time, at any place, if there was anything sweet around, your body knew to consume it there and then. And at the time, this could have meant life or death. Now, unfortunately, the stakes today are not nearly as high. And I would say that most people, if not everybody watching this video, does not struggle with food scarcity either at all or definitely not to the extent that cavemen did. Meaning that eating the bag of gummy bears on your nightstand isn't life or death. It's really just how much willpower do you have to overcome your primal urges. In today's world, eating anything sweet you can get your hands on almost has the opposite effect, because at best, this excess sugar is just going to put extra weight on your body. And at worst, it's actually going to have a detrimental effect on your overall health. The complete opposite of the intent of this instinct in primal times. So if you ever feel bad about having low discipline when it comes to sweets, it's because a caveman hundreds of thousands of years ago realized that berries and honey give you a kick of energy that bugs, leaves, and animal fats just couldn't do. Oh, and as a quick bonus, the reason why everything in the world today is so sugary is directly related to the human instinct of craving excess sugar. Humans don't crave sugar because everything in the modern diet is full of sugar, because these companies realized long ago that humans fundamentally crave sugar. And if these food companies could provide it to you, you are very unlikely to say no. And that's another trend you'll notice in this video. Not only are your instincts personally working against yourself, but other entities are using your instincts against you for profit, which is kind of dystopian. Another more dystopian part of modern day life is the fact that even though we are living in the best time ever to exist as a human, we likely deal with the most issues ever. And this is because humans have a deeply ingrained negative bias, which, like you guessed, in primal times served a crucial purpose in our survival. But in the modern day, in a world full of complexity, it only makes our life that was supposed to be easier much harder. I would argue that most people understand that they should be grateful for everything they have in their life. But realistically, gratitude is something you kind of have to remind yourself to have and do. And this is because your mind isn't naturally programmed to be like, oh, this is so great, this is awesome. No, your mind is actually programmed for the opposite. The ancient primal world was filled with real immediate dangers, natural disasters, predators, other tribes, famine, and so forth. You and your loved ones' lives were consistently under attack. And because of this, the best way to survive in a world where everything could and would kill you is to be aware of those things and to primarily focus on the negative or dangerous aspects of life, which at the time was a lot more common than anything else. And while this bias as a caveman was extremely crucial, in the modern day where almost none of these threats exist, we are still dealing with the consequences of this bias. Just think about it. If there was two cavemen in prehistoric times, one who went on a walk and saw, oh, there's a dangerous thing, I'm not gonna go there. Oh, I stepped on something sharp, this place could be dangerous. I'm gonna go home and remember this and just, keep this in the back of my mind. Versus a caveman that went on a walk and was just like, oh, that's a pretty tree. Oh, cool. That's a cool looking lion running directly towards me. That's majestic. Which of the two do you think is going to survive? And I mean, the answer is kind of obvious. But like I mentioned, tiger attacks and starvation are fortunately not much of a risk for many people today. So we transition this worry and this part of our brain onto other aspects of more modern life. Job security, social status, rejection, failure, the opinions of others. And because the world that we live in is just so complex and there is so much to think about, And because the negativity bias is an instinct so deeply ingrained within our psyche, if you don't consciously try to counteract this negativity bias, it could lead to some very serious consequences. And it's extremely easy to spiral into overthinking and stressing and, coming up with worst case scenarios and ultimately developing things such as anxiety or depression. And a common example of this negativity bias is, once we lay down on our bed and close our eyes, all of a sudden every horrible thing that happened to us ever comes to mind. Keep in mind, in ancient times, before you go to bed, it's helpful to have a checklist of everything you notice today that could be bad, but in modern times, it's just gonna make going to bed harder and possibly damage your self-esteem. And if that was the first time you've ever done something like that, then you probably experienced a lot of fear, specifically fear of the unknown, which is likely one of the oldest human instincts we all have to this very day. Our ancestors had to essentially trial and error every aspect of life always, and the stakes were typically life or death. And because of this, the best way to mitigate as much risk as possible was to simply stick with what you know and avoid what you didn't know, which led to the development of the fear of the unknown. During ancient times, exploring a place that was dark and you couldn't quite see, encountering an animal that you were unfamiliar with, or even seeing weather that you haven't quite seen before, all could very well lead to the death of you and anybody around you. Meaning that the best way to stay alive was to avoid and fear any of these things you were unfamiliar with. And this instinct is still around to this very day. But once again, in modern times, this instinct isn't helpful and is often counterproductive. And while I would definitely say that there is an argument for the fear of the unknown being helpful today, there is still places where it isn't helpful. Specifically when it comes to exploring opportunities that could ultimately be beneficial. Like, let's say, starting a new relationship, trying a new food, going to a new city, moving, meeting new people. In the modern day, when things are so safe and so civilized, there are so many amazing opportunities to come out of exploring the unknown and seeking discomfort and truly trying to overcome this instinct. But the reality is just that. This is an instinct that has to be overcome to experience these things. And because of this, there is a saying that I think is rather accurate, is that most people would rather experience a familiar hell than an unknown heaven. And it's interesting because even though in that hypothetical that the unknown situation would be objectively better, because it's unknown, it's still scarier than dealing with something objectively worse that you're at least familiar with. But it wasn't only the unknown that our ancestors were afraid of. There was actually quite a few fears that our ancestors hold that we still hold today. Another example being the fear of failure. Now, once again, there is instances where this fear is still helpful in the modern day, but as a whole, the exaggerated fear of failure is more detrimental to people than it is helpful. In ancient times, goals were simple and immediate. If you were on a hunt, your goal was to secure an animal. If you're looking to reproduce, your goal is to secure a mate. If you're looking for shelter, your goal is to find a warm and comfortable place. And in all of these instances, if you failed to meet your goal, your life or your bloodline was done. And those stakes are pretty high. And over hundreds of thousands of years of development, our brain began to realize that if we really want something, we cannot accept failure as an option. And while in the modern day, many of our goals are not life or death at all, a lot of people still act like them. Doing worse on an assignment than you anticipated, not getting the promotion you wanted, having an application denied for almost anything. All of these things are uncomfortable and upsetting, but in most cases, they are not life or death. Although some people still act like they are, but it is so ingrained in our being to have that exaggerated fear of failing that typically only holds us back and will cause us to feel a sense of dread when in reality the situation may be mildly infuriating or potentially disappointing, but definitely not life or death. But another consequence of failure in ancient times beyond just immediate death was also a loss of social status. You see, humans have always been tribal people, pack animals, if you will. And within packs or groups, there is a hierarchy. And within hierarchies, there is status, which determines where you stand on the food chain. In ancient times, we were extremely motivated to seek status, not to satisfy our egos, but to ensure our survival. Because in ancient tribes, the higher status individuals typically got the most benefits, the best shelter, the most food, and so on. And the opposite was also true. If you were low status in the tribe, you would be getting scraps. You would be living in the worst of places. And in severe situations, you would be outright outcast from the group, essentially being left for dead. And for that reason, it's reasonable to understand why seeking social status was so important in prehistoric times. But as we all know, this is not a habit that's gone away. And in modern times, people seek status more than ever, while, interestingly, the stakes are much lower. Sure, in the modern day, there is so many benefits to having status. Celebrities, for example, have access to the best of everything. They get treated better than everybody else. They can afford everything and still get things for free. And there are definitely benefits to that in the modern day. day, although I would argue it doesn't guarantee your survival anymore. Because in the modern day, you don't need social status to live. An entry-level job, a simple side hustle, or even a small business are all things that could sustain you and provide you a comfortable and potentially even abundant life, with status being completely out of the equation. And sure, this drive for status could still give you a better life, but it also could send you on a completely meaningless pursuit that at the end of your life you realize wasn't worth it at all. And I would say in most cases, this drive is almost solely egoic and not survival focused. And I think one of the most common instances that we all experience in regards to this drive for status is how we compare ourselves to others consistently. In a world full of social media, we are force-fed other people's lives on a daily basis. And typically that experience looks like, wow, they're doing better than me. And the reason we do this is because we are perceiving them to be higher status than us. And it means that we are at risk of being evicted from the group and getting less than we may need to survive. And as we know, this mindset of comparison and seeing ourselves as less than others who only present the best parts of their life typically leads to anxiety, depression, and many of the other common consequences of having a primal brain in an extremely advanced world. Which is why I believe this drive to be completely useless, if not counterproductive. Because in most cases, you just feel worse about yourself, even though you are completely capable of surviving and having a meaningful and happy life. But even if you don't crave being a high status individual, you typically at the very least crave fitting in. Which brings us to the next ancient instinct, the human impulse of adopting a herd mentality. As we just mentioned in the previous instinct, humans in tribes were safer, and humans on their own were not. And while climbing the social ladder is one goal, even maintaining where you are is an entirely separate goal. The human brain evolved in tribes and closely monitored the group, copying all of their behavior because they see that these other people are alive, so they're gonna do what these other living, surviving people are doing, because that's really the ultimate goal. And because of that, most people were on the same page. While at the same time, individuals who showed attributes that weren't directly in line with the tribe, whether it be doing something that resulted in their instant death or simply doing something that the tribe didn't approve of, let's say not reciprocating sharing food or not contributing, would result in being exiled, which was essentially a death sentence. If you notice that everybody does one thing and the people who don't do that thing either die or get kicked out of the group, you're going to quickly learn that it's best to do what everybody else is doing and not stray too far from that. In prehistoric times, it meant coexistence. But once again, today, the stakes are not nearly as high. But that doesn't stop our brain from trying to keep us in line with the greater group. Everybody in one shape or another fears rejection. Whether it be talking to somebody you find attractive, trying to sell something, or simply trying to find a place that you belong. Nobody wants to be told no or that they don't fit in. And this is something that we experience from a very young age and most people carry through the rest of their life. And while herd mentality can manifest itself in a lot of ways, it's most commonly experienced by simply not wanting to stand out or make too many waves or rock the boat. So if you ever feel bad about your desire to fit in and want to be somebody else or want to have other attributes so you could be more like others, it's not that you hate yourself or it's not that you're wrong. It's simply the biology of your brain telling you that if you are more like others, you will have a higher chance of living. And while that's not really the case today, your brain doesn't really know the difference. And similar to our fear of the unknown, this herd mentality in most cases in the modern time holds us back rather than protects us. We stop ourselves from pursuing the things we truly love or doing things we really want to do. It stops us from taking risks or doing things that seem out of the norm. The goal of this herd mentality is to keep us alive, not happy. And what that looks like today is simply doing something that you know is safe, even if you don't like to do it, because doing the thing you want to do might not give you that same safe result. And that could apply to a career, a lifestyle, or really anything. Your brain has decided that the safest way to live is going with the path of least resistance. And what that typically looks like is doing what everybody else is doing. And this is an ancient instinct that is very evident in the modern day. Almost as evident, at least, as our need for control. I would say a good majority of people at some point in their life struggle with having a pretty strong to severe need for control in at least some aspect of their life. Whether it be some sort of power trip or perfectionism or simply a sheer need for things to go their way. The ancient human mind craved control because it was predictable, and it craved that simplicity and predictability, and how that manifested was learning to seek order and trying to create a routine in a world that was completely unpredictable, but somehow simultaneously seasonal and cyclical. And how this looked in ancient times was using this need for this control to establish routines that allowed life to exist, following migration patterns of animals that would sustain your tribe's life, understanding the seasons and following weather patterns and predicting what happens when you saw a certain cloud, controlling the amount of wood you put on your fire to ensure it never never went out. All of these actions are rooted in a desire for routine, order, and ultimately control. But in the modern day, this need for control has manifested rather differently. And the biggest way that our need for control hinders us in the modern day is by people trying to control factors that are out of their control. And this need that people feel that ultimately leads them to have extreme stress and anxiety about certain situations. In ancient times, the only thing we could control was our actions. And our need for control was based in our actionable pursuit of living. But in the modern day, with infinite information at our fingertips in a world that is more complex than our brain could ever perceive, this need for control oversteps its usefulness and becomes a hindrance, whether it be just being socially unlikable because you are too bossy, or being unable to enjoy something because it is not to your exact liking, or spending your free time worrying about something that you have no control over simply because you desire it going a certain way. And these negative feelings associated with feeling out of control leads to a negative spiral, because if you feel out of control, you feel weak, you feel less. And it's through these negative emotions that our brain develops pattern recognition, so it knows exactly what to avoid, so it cannot feel bad, so it cannot die. And this brings us to the final instinct on this list. Looking for patterns that are basically not there. This instinct comes from our brain's natural desire to want to make sense of this world we live in. And in prehistoric times, spotting a pattern could make the difference between your existence and your very quick non-existence. If you notice that every time you eat a certain red berry, you throw it violently, you'll probably begin to avoid that. If you notice a pattern of everybody who wrestles with a tiger turning into red jelly, you're not going to wrestle with tigers. And from these examples, we can see the obvious advantage of pattern recognition. It's our brain's quick and easy way to quickly evaluate a situation and whether it should be avoided or pursued. And pattern recognition works both ways. Similar to our sugar craving we mentioned at the beginning of the video, if we see something that we know is sweet, we are going to be motivated to get to it. And on the same token, we may be hesitant to get this honey because we know that while the honey is sweet, the bees are plentiful and they are stinging. In the modern day, pattern recognition is definitely not life or death, but it is an extremely important part of our everyday lives. And this ability to recognize patterns allows us to maintain a lot of free mental bandwidth, because if every time we approached a certain situation we had to reevaluate it from scratch, well, you would be thinking consistently. But if you have a kind of mental catalog of things you could quickly reference every time you see something you've seen before, your mind is able to streamline the process of thinking, which is something your brain's always trying to do. But here's the thing, even though pattern recognition in the modern day can and is extremely helpful in some cases, much like the others we've discussed that are helpful, they typically overstay their welcome and overstep and can be very detrimental. And how pattern recognition typically oversteps in the modern day is by causing us to misinterpret events without context, overthink situations that are not as deep as we think, or jump to conclusions that are not there. And the reason why we do all of these things is because our mind is consistently trying to understand things. So if we have a little bit of context around something, our brain is going to try as hard as possible to try to categorize the unknown with something we know, which is most often seen when people are generalizing things, whether it be about ideas or even people. Our brain wants to seek a pattern so it can reassure itself it knows what's going on here. In ancient times, if you saw an animal with pointy teeth, you didn't need any more context about it. But in modern times, you can see a person with tattoos and go, wow, this is a bad, scary person, I'm going to avoid them. When in reality, the fact that somebody may or may not have tattoos means absolutely nothing about their character and who this person may be. But our ancient brain that we possess wants to keep us safe and wants to generalize as much as possible, to quickly process information and to conserve as much energy as possible. And that wasn't a knock at people with tattoos. I have tattoos myself, they're just under my red shirt. But it's an old-timey stereotype that I thought would make sense. And by this point of the video, you've probably already begun to recognize some patterns yourself. One pattern is that all of the entries on this list are actually intertwined and typically work off of each other to help your brain do its best to understand things quickly and survive. But another pattern I want to suggest is that our brain is just doing the best it can. It's obvious that our brain has evolved to be as beneficial as possible, and our brain has done an extremely good job of developing an operating system that is optimized to keep us alive in the prehistoric world. However, while we have had a brain that has had hundreds and thousands of years to develop to a certain style of life, over the last few thousand years, our civilization has developed rapidly at a pace that our brain is simply not able to catch up to, which has landed us in the situation that we are in now. We are living in an extremely advanced society using powerful hardware that have a outdated operating system, and we're just trying to make it all work. But the bright side is this. While our brain still has instincts within it that are no longer helpful and sometimes hurtful to us, we still have the power and ability to overcome these ancient instincts. With awareness, focus, and intention, you can consciously make an effort to begin to personally reprogram your brain to be more suited to live in the modern day. And these are things that we've already began to do, whether it be consciously or unconsciously. And at the end of the day, our brain is our friend, and our instincts are trying their best to keep us alive. The world we live in is just a little bit different than what our brain is used to. So we've got to kind of update the software on our own, but that's kind of just part of the journey. So if you've been struggling with any of these things that I've talked about in this video, whether it be a craving for sugar, trying to fit in, feeling bad about other people being higher status than you, or craving control, realize that you're not broken and you're not wrong. You're simply experiencing the ancient programming that your brain has developed over hundreds of thousands of years of existence. But understand that this doesn't define you and that you can have a conscious impact on how your brain operates moving forward with enough intention and effort. Forbidden places you will never visit. Just imagine you're on a fishing boat in the Bay of Bengal. You've had a successful day and it's time to get back to shore, when all of a sudden a typhoon forms right in front of your face over the water. And before you know it, your boat has been flipped and you are essentially lost at sea. Your entire crew is gone and you're holding onto a floating board for dear life. Your energy is low from kicking and screaming, and you pass out, clinging to this board. You wake up later, looking at a clear sky, and you notice you're not in the water anymore. You're on the beach, but you don't know what beach you're at because you weren't near land. You cough up some water and start to sit up when you realize a small bunch of blobs in the distance. You see them approach and you realize that it's people, but not people you've seen before. The closer you get, the more you realize that these people are barely clothed and wielding sticks and bows. Did you time travel? Unfortunately not. You have just washed up on North Sentinel Island. North Sentinel Island is the first location on this list, and it is likely one of the most well-known forbidden places in the entire world. Oh, and as far as the fisherman who washed up on the beach, yeah, his skull is now a pendant for one of the Sentinelese people. North Sentinel Island is one of the Andaman Islands in the Indian archipelago in the Bay of Bengal, which also includes some other smaller islands as well. What makes North Sentinel Island so unique is the fact that it's solely occupied by a voluntarily isolated indigenous tribe, who are believed to have been there for over 60,000 years. These people are known as the Sentinelese, and they have made their wishes known by force, specifically by killing anybody who tries to contact them or even come close. They have made their message so clear that the Indian Navy patrols the area around the North Sentinel Island to protect it from people trying to enter it. And the Indian government does not prosecute any Sentinelese people for killing people that try to step ashore. That's insane that this uncontacted tribe is essentially immune to the law. The Sentinelese have not only attacked people that have stepped on shore, but have also repeatedly attacked approaching vessels, whether those be fishing boats or simply any sort of low-flying helicopter or plane in the range of their bows and arrows. The story I told at the beginning of this segment is actually inspired by real events that took place in 2006. During this time, Sentinelese islanders killed 2 fishermen whose boat drifted ashore. And like the intro story, this approach wasn't even intentional. Although, speaking of intentionally visiting the Sentinelese, in 2018, a 26-year-old man named John Chu, who was an American Christian missionary, tried on 3 separate attempts to visit the North Sentinelese people, likely to convert them to Christianity, but unfortunately on his 3rd trip, which he was successfully able to approach these people, he was unsurprisingly murdered, which is obviously unfortunate. But this young man was warned by the Indian government and other authorities. In 1956, there was an Islands Protection of Aboriginal Tribes regulation that was put in place that restricted any approach closer than 5 nautical miles, which is essentially anywhere within a 10-kilometer radius of the island. The biggest reason why this regulation was put in place is to protect the Sentinelese people from mainland diseases. Due to the severity of the isolation of North Sentinel Island, they have almost no immunity to any modern-day disease or germ that may be on you or I right now. So if you were to visit North Sentinel Island, there's a very likely chance that even spending time around them, breathing near them, shaking one of their hands, could lead to the death of the entire population of the Sentinelese people simply by spreading germs. North Sentinel Island is a forbidden location that I personally don't intend on breaking any rules to visit. But what if fishing wasn't your speed? Perhaps you are more interested in agriculture, specifically Chinese agriculture. The year is 1974, and you are simply on your farm. And what's a good farm without a well? So, you start digging a well. However, this day was different. As you start digging, you notice something. Something that is about to uncover one of the largest excavation projects of all time. And then you go deeper and you notice hardened fragments of terracotta. And then you notice bronze arrowheads. And then terracotta bricks. Well, in that case, you just discovered the tomb of Qin Shi Huang, the first Qin emperor of China. These artifacts were submitted to the government, and shortly after, archaeologists arrived. And although they were curious and interested about the artifacts that may have laid underground, they were not at all prepared for what they were about to find. What they found was a massive necropolis, the size of a small city, with a plethora of artifacts, weapons, vehicles, and most famously, terracotta soldiers. There is estimated to be over 8,000 terracotta soldiers in total, but that actual figure is unknown because this mausoleum is still not fully excavated and may never be. Keep in mind, this excavation has been going on since 1974 and still continues to this day. This mausoleum was built from 246 to 208 BC. The mausoleum mirrored the city of Jianyang with an inner and outer city structure. And although this outer and inner city structure where the terracotta soldiers have been found has began to be excavated, one place that has never been touched was the tomb itself. This tomb is at the very center of the complex, and it is very large. In case the thousands of terracotta soldiers were not enough of a sign, the late Qin Shi Huang did not want people entering his tomb. At least, not without a fight, I guess. So I suppose that begs the question, why did the government keep excavating? Well, the three reasons they listed publicly were the following. One was the fact that this area was a seismic zone, and they needed to remove these historic artifacts to protect them. The next reason was for tourism, to potentially make it something that people could visit and appreciate. And the third reason was to prevent grave robbing, essentially theorizing that if they didn't take it, somebody else would. In case the 8,000 terracotta soldiers didn't make this obvious, this mausoleum is massive. The replicate inner city is over 2.5 kilometers in circumference, and the outer city is over 6.3 kilometers in circumference, which is insane for a mausoleum. Even the tomb itself is massive. It's believed to be 80 meters east to west and 50 meters north to south, and 15 meters tall on the inside. However, the interior height is debated. It is a very real possibility that we will never be able to know what's inside the tomb, simply because of limitations in archaeological abilities, specifically the risk of destroying so many other artifacts just to get inside the tomb. But we do have historical accounts of what is said to be inside the tomb, which is the following. The emperor's tomb is surrounded by rivers of liquid mercury, which was the emperor's immortality elixir of choice. Which, just quick side note, yeah, this emperor was literally drinking mercury to try to extend his life, which ironically ended up causing him to go crazy and die. But okay, back to the historical account. There is a domed ceiling representing celestial bodies made from pearls and precious gems. The floor has a design of the entire map of his empire. And besides all of his precious belongings and stunning architecture, there was of course claims of booby traps, specifically crossbow traps that would be activated if anybody tried to enter the tomb, which would result in them, of course, being shot and killed. Here's where things get interesting. These accounts were of course questionable, and archaeologists were suspicious. But after probing the soil near the tomb, it was confirmed that the mercury levels in the soil were 100 times over the normal level, giving some credibility to these historic claims. Which also gives credibility to the fact that there may be booby traps, which has essentially spooked archaeologists, as they believe these traps would be fully functioning, which I personally find hard to believe, but I also wouldn't risk it either. This tomb is listed as a World Heritage Site and is therefore protected by legal entities. But that's not the only reason why you're not able to go here. Unlike North Sentinel Island, which is relatively easy to visit if you have a boat or know somebody with a boat, the tomb of Qin Shi Huang is simply unable to be reached, at least to any regular person with reasonable means. What I mean is, of course, if you hypothetically had a bunch of dynamite, you could blow it up, but obviously that's not realistic. Or is it? No. Unless... Just kidding. Therefore, you're not only not allowed to visit it, you're also not able, making it a perfect entry for this list. Let's hope that you got your sea legs back, because we're hitting the water again. This time, we're going to a remote island intentionally, although it's not off the coast of India. This island is actually in the Arctic Circle. This island is known as Spitsbergen, and it's tucked away in the Arctic Svalbard archipelago. And if you're wondering why we're going here, it's primarily because of your passion for agriculture. Spitsbergen is the home of the Svalbard Global Seed Vault, and this seed vault is one of the most interesting places in the entire world, and is kind of an interesting take on the Doomsday Vault. In short, it's an ultra-secure facility with the sole purpose of being a safeguard for global crop diversity by storing duplicates of every known seed. This place is really just a sperm bank for plants, or other stuff like that. The Seed Vault is actually a partnership between the Norwegian government and Crop Trust, which is a genetic resource center, which sounds evil, but probably isn't. but it might be. This facility is epic, and if you like brutalist architecture, you are going to love this building. It's essentially a concrete slab sticking out the side of a mountain in the middle of an uninhabited Arctic wasteland. To me, it seems like a pretty cool place to store some stuff. The entire facility goes almost 400 feet into the side of a mountain, and a majority of this facility is kept at negative 18 degrees Celsius, as that is the recommended temperature to store seeds. I guess, I don't know, I'm not a seed expert. One unique failsafe about this facility that I think is pretty cool is the fact that even if all the refrigeration units failed today, the seed vault would still be completely protected because it is stored within permafrost, meaning that it's very well insulated and very cold. Now, if only the people that designed this designed the Death Star too. As of 2022, there is over 1.2 million unique types of seeds in this facility. And interestingly, and potentially somewhat obviously, this facility is not manned. It is autonomous, and I suppose that's a good thing considering the fact that it's literally in the middle of nowhere, always kept at deadly temperatures with basically nothing around you. This seed bank is a really unique modern invention that I think serves a genuine purpose that hopefully we will never need, but could very well serve a massive role in the development of humanity if it ever came to it. I think it goes without saying that this seed vault is completely off limits. Not only is it in an extremely remote location in a part of the world that's already hard to navigate and travel to, but the facility itself is extremely secure. So unfortunately, you won't be able to check out the cool seed collection, but that's okay. And you're a person of culture. Modern archives and architecture is cool, but you want history. You want to see some cool stuff and some old stuff. And for that exact reason, we're going to France. The date is September 12th, 1940, and you and your trusty dog are on a walk like any other day. Your dog notices a hole left by an uprooted tree, and you notice something rather interesting, but you don't bother at the moment. You go home and ponder on what you may have saw and decide that you have some unfinished business, and you return to that uprooted tree with 3 of your best friends. You begin digging, a common theme in this video I suppose, and notice that this uprooted tree has a lot below it. Specifically, a 15-meter deep cave shaft. You and your friends are brave, and you enter the cave and start exploring. And not only do you see some cool stalactites and stalagmites and light brights, but you also see interesting designs on the walls. Those designs were ancient cave paintings depicting animals. This cave is known as Lascaux Cave, and it is a network of caves in southwestern France with over 600 cave paintings found on the interior walls of its caves. It is suggested that these paintings were not made all at once and that they were the combined effort of many generations. And although they haven't been able to quite pinpoint a date for each and every one of these paintings, the general consensus is that these paintings are anywhere from 17 to 22,000 years old, which is so cool. There was an amount of time where this cave was actually open to the public for tours, but over time, due to carbon dioxide, heat, humidity, and other contaminants produced by the 1,200 visitors that visited these caves a day, the paintings were essentially disintegrating and were being visibly damaged. Therefore, the cave was closed to the public in 1963. Since then, the paintings have been restored to their original state and a monitoring system has been put in place. It's actually just a baguette holding a door closed. I don't know, I'm sure they've got something amazing. So yeah, unless you're able to travel at least 70 years into the past, you're not going to be seeing these original 22,000-year-old paintings. However, this story does have a bit of a happy ending, because obviously there was demand for these cave tours, and that wasn't going anywhere anytime soon. So what the authorities actually did was create exact replicas of this cave system for people to explore and visit without any risk of the originals being damaged, which is honestly pretty cool. But what isn't cool is snakes. And since 2 out of the 4 entries on this list so far have been on islands, let's add another one to the list and combine the 2. Snakes in an island. You know what that gets you? You're right. Snake Island. No, not the island boy's haircut. Snake Island is an island, I know. And it is also off the coast of Brazil. The island is famous for, of course, its large population of venomous snakes, specifically the golden lancehead pit viper. And what's interesting is that this island is the only known natural home for this breed of snakes. But there is a bit of mystery surrounding this island. How exactly did these snakes get here, and why is there so many of them? It's not called Snake Island because there's a few. It's called Snake Island because it's only inhabited by snakes, and a lot of them at that. The island is roughly 106 acres in area and is believed to be the home of around 400,000 snakes, although that number more recently has been debated. But if you ask me, I don't think we're getting an accurate head count anytime soon. Point being, there is a lot of snakes on this island. But the question remains, how did these snakes get here? And I hope you brought your tissues because it's kind of a sad story. Basically, when the Portuguese colonized Brazil, the Portuguese made all of the native Brazilians disown their pet snakes. Obviously, outraged, the native Brazilians didn't give up their snakes without a fight, and they banded up all of their snakes and sent them off to sea on a raft, hoping that they would find a better life. After a few days, this raft of about 500,000 snakes washed up ashore on this uninhabited island, and the rest is history. I totally just made all of that up. The real reason why there is so many snakes on this island is much more simple. During the last ice age, this island, which is now 33 kilometers off the coast of Brazil, was actually connected to the mainland. But near the end of the ice age, as water levels started to rise, the snakes essentially became trapped on this island. Their population grew due to a lack of natural predators. Fortunately, these snakes weren't the only animals on the island. There was actually a plethora of ladders, but unfortunately, after a few dangerous games of snakes and ladders, only the snakes remained. I don't know why I'm lying so much in this video, but hopefully you can tell fact from fiction. Sure, there's a lot of snakes on an island, but there's a lot of snakes on a plane too, and people are still on the plane. Why is there not people on this island? Well, similar to North Sentinel Island, Snake Island is off limits to any civilians. The Brazilian Navy claims that this is for the protection of both the snakes and the people that may potentially try to access the island. The only people that are advised to go on the island have to be vetted by the Institute for Biodiversity Conservation, which I'm assuming is no easy task. And if you try to go the other way, well, you'll have to deal with the Brazilian Navy. And similar to North Sentinel Island, if the snakes kill you, the Brazilian Navy is not going to put them in jail. That's crazy that now twice on this list, there is groups of people that are immune to the law simply because they got an island. I wonder if there is any more recent examples of people with islands breaking the law. That's an interesting phenomenon, but let's keep moving. Wait, okay, last thing I'm gonna say about Snake Island. Making fake maps claiming that there is buried treasure on this remote island, when in reality, it's actually just Snake Island, would be a hilarious prank. Not in the modern day, but definitely pirate times, dude. This was a pirate time banger of a prank, guaranteed. You know what? We're on the topic of islands. Last island, one last island for the list. Palette cleanse, we'll go through it quick. Morgan Island. No story, no nothing. Just straight up facts. Morgan Island is also known as Monkey Island, and if you can't guess why it's called that, you may live on Monkey Island. Monkey Island is famous for, of course, its population of free-ranged monkeys. It is completely uninhabited by people, and this island is protected by the Department of Natural Resources and the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, which use it for public health research, which unfortunately is basically just animal testing. Boo. Monkey Island, unlike Snake Island, is not naturally occurring, and actually has a very odd origin story. To put it bluntly, there was a lot of monkeys in Puerto Rico that were carrying hepatitis B, and it was becoming so much of a problem that there was frequent outbreaks. So what is the most logical and reasonable next step? Well, according to some people in 1979, the best idea was to capture 1,400 monkeys and relocate them to a remote island in South Carolina. And ladies and gentlemen, Morgan Island, aka Monkey Island. So in case you ever wanted to be surrounded by over 1,000 monkeys with hepatitis, Morgan Island definitely needs to be on your travel wish list. But you don't just want to go to remote islands full of uncontacted tribes or a plethora of dangerous animals. And you don't want to go to rural China. And you don't like the cold, so Norway's out too. Well, if that's the case, then I have one last location for you. And if you're a Reddit meme lord, then you're going to be right at home. This last forbidden location takes us to a salt flat in the middle of Nevada. The salt flat is known as Groom Lake. And what makes this salt flat relevant to this video is what's built on the salt flat. That being a Nevada test and training range. But there's military bases everywhere, so what makes this one so special? This test and training range is home to one of the most popular and highly classified United States Air Force bases, most commonly known as Area 51. Interestingly, Area 51 was never considered a secret base. However, it is the home for some of the most secret and sensitive documents that pertain to military intel in the United States. The origin of the name Area 51 is actually unknown. However, according to the CIA, the proper names for the facility are Homey Airport and Groom Lake. The primary initial purpose of Area 51 was a testing ground for Project Aquatone, the development of the Lockheed U-2, which was one of the most iconic spy planes of all time, and still has a lot of mystery surrounding it, almost 70 years later. Since then, this area has gained a lot more popularity, and due to the secrecy surrounding it, there has been no shortage of questions, mysteries, and conspiracy theories surrounding the happenings of this military base. Obviously, with the most famous examples being its affiliation with aliens. I honestly wish I had more to talk about, but facts about this location are kind of hard to come by, and I don't think I need to explain why a military base with sensitive information is off limits. But I do find it kind of interesting that, although this is a perfect entry for this video, it's a bit of a catch-22, because for any random civilian, Area 51 is a place you will never even get close to, at least not alive. But for hundreds of people, this is a place they come every single day. It's their job. But that's a different story. In 2019, there was actually a large movement for people with way too much free time to storm Area 51 to get answers and see an alien for themselves. This movement was heavily meme-based, but was still very real. On the night of the actual event, over 1,500 people showed up at the border of Area 51, primarily partying and enjoying the scenery, although some took it more serious than others. At the end of the event, nobody got in, surprisingly nobody died, and 7 people were arrested. It was a mostly peaceful meme, but I'm sure when all of this was gaining traction and popularity online, some government employees were definitely starting to sweat a bit. Survival myths that would actually get you killed. You and your best bro are sitting on the couch watching TV, bored out of your mind. You're flipping through the channels when you see somebody you recognize. It's the British guy who goes outside and drinks his own pee for fun. After watching him squeeze elephant poop into his mouth to drink water, you decide to go outside and test your survival capabilities, and also test how real common survival knowledge really is in practice. Because let's be real, whether you're an outdoorsy person or not, we've all heard survival tips at some point in our life. Are these tips that we've always just accepted as truth actually life-saving? Or could they potentially get you killed? And with you and your friends being inspired, you both pack your bags and head out the door for the adventure of a lifetime, not knowing whether or not this would be your last adventure. You were just dropped in an extremely remote location by a helicopter. And as you watch the helicopter fly off, you and your friend are now completely alone, left to your own devices, and your sole goal is to survive and make it home using only the knowledge that you've heard in passing. Before you and your friend can even take your first steps, you need to first understand what direction should you go. And before you could even think, your friend says, why don't we go north? And while you agree, you have a question. How do we know which way is north? But luckily, everybody knows if you want to know which direction is north, all you have to do is find a tree with moss on it, because moss will only grow on the north side of the tree. So you and your friend begin walking until you notice a tree that has moss growing on the bottom of it. And as you approach the tree, that you can see that the moss is in your direction, meaning that if you just do a 180 and start turning around, you'll be going north. Although, just to be sure, you take a quick look around the tree and realize that there isn't only moss on the north side, there's moss on the north, south, east, and west side. This tree trunk is completely covered in moss, and it's not the only one. All of these tree trunks have moss all over them, meaning that you have no idea which way is north, and also debunking this myth that moss is somehow a compass. But this myth isn't just straight out of a fairy tale. There is some basis of reality here, although it's just not fully accurate or reliable at all. According to Michigan State University, it is more likely for moss to grow more prominently on the north side of trees and rocks, although moss can grow basically anywhere, meaning that if you are using moss to navigate, you are setting yourself up for failure, and in a survival situation, setting yourself up for your own possible demise. And while I like organic stuff as much as the next person, I'm gonna stick to my GPS, or at least my compass, when it comes to navigation. Feeling slightly foolish and a bit betrayed, you and your friend decide to confirm which direction is north with your compass and begin moving. So far, this walk is pleasant, and the forest that you guys are in is beautiful and lush, and the steps begin to fly by, and you and your friend are almost lost in conversation when your friend realizes something utterly terrifying. Because the vegetation on the ground is so lush, it's almost impossible to see what's lurking around your feet. And while your friend wasn't looking down, a venomous snake was able to slither onto his boot, up his pant leg, and wrap around your friend's thigh. But the snake didn't just end there. This snake, straight out of Data University, decided to bite your friend directly on the crotch. And by the time you even noticed the snake wrapped around your friend's leg, it was too late, and your friend was screaming in agony. Fortunately, you were able to quickly grab the snake and throw it off into the wilderness. But now you are left with a massive problem. Your friend has just been bitten by a venomous snake. But fortunately, he has a survival tip. It's common knowledge that when somebody receives a venomous snake bite, the best thing to do is immediately suck out the venom, right? It's only logical. The entry wound is still fresh. If you can pull the toxins directly out of the wound, you're only dealing with a small cut and not any venom being directly injected into your bloodstream. It's perfectly logical. And although the placement may be a bit unfortunate, you'd be willing to help your friend out if it was life or death. But in reality, this practice wouldn't be helpful at all. And here's how. Like I mentioned, it may seem initially logical that you would want to remove the venom by any means possible. And some people have even suggested that you should cut the injection site of the fang to make it bigger to be able to suck out more venom. But the reality is this: once a snake has bitten its victim, there is no way for you to suck out any meaningful amount of venom. And if you were to cut the bite location, you would only be making the wound bigger, causing a higher chance of infection. Speaking of infection, putting your bacteria-ridden mouth on your friend's fresh wound is only going to increase the chances of introducing bacteria directly into your friend's fresh wound. And while it is possible to suck out a small amount of venom, it is not going to be a large enough amount to save your friend's life. However, it could be a large enough amount to cause yourself serious bodily harm or potentially even death as well. So yeah, even though your friend was extremely keen on you removing the venom out of his wound the good old-fashioned way, you luckily both had access to Google just for this brief amount of time, and you were able to confirm that this practice was outdated and potentially deadly and fatal to both of you. And the best course of action would be to limit your friend's mobility. This way, the venom would travel through your friend's body as slowly as possible, giving you the maximum amount of time to get antidote before things got fatal. However, due to plot armor, you had antidote on you and you were able to heal your friend without doing any sort of mouth-to-wound suction. After you administer the antidote and you allow your friend to bandage himself up, you both continue on your trek through the woods, feeling better and grateful to be alive, but also feeling more betrayed, because so far, everything you thought you knew was wrong. But before you and your friend could continue to complain about how crazy that entire ordeal was, you run into a much bigger problem. A 750-pound problem that's looking you right in the face. This problem is an adult, aggressive black bear. Your first instinct is to run the opposite way, but before you could even turn, your friend whips his arm around and clenches your arm tightly, holding you in your place. You look your friend in the eye and he tells you, "Are you crazy, man? We can't run away. We have to act like we're already dead." And with your friend's iron grip being on your arm, you have no other option but to lay down beside him. And now the both of you are laying on the ground with a 750-pound black bear slowly approaching your position. You and your friend at this point may be feeling like you just saved your lives. You outsmarted the black bear, and in a few minutes you'll be back well on your way. But in reality, you just made the black bear's life a lot easier and served him up 2 meals on a silver platter. I think most of us at some point have heard, if you see a bear, just play dead. But I think at this point, hopefully most people know that there is definitely some nuance to that. Specifically, that advice does not apply to all bears. Black bears, for example, do not take well to people playing dead. And this is exactly why the bear is currently shaking your friend in his mouth like a dog that just got a new chew toy. Black bears are notoriously aggressive, and if you encounter one, your best course of action is 1, slowly retreat if it doesn't notice you, but if it is fixated on you, your best next steps are to get as big and aggressive as possible. Obviously, you can't fight this bear, but you want to make this bear believe that it's not even worth fighting you. You want to extend your arms and legs outward, look big as possible, yell, sound aggressive, do anything to intimidate this bear, and if you're convincing enough, you may even scare the bear in this process. Grizzly bears, on the other hand, are a bit different. Experts say that grizzly bears respond better if you actually do lay down on the ground, although it's best if you protect your neck just in case and remain still until the bear checks you out and hopefully leaves you alone. And if you happen to end up in a situation where you're face to face with a polar bear, your best bet is to pray, because polar bears are like black bears, but worse. They are the most aggressive and the most likely to tear your head off. So yeah, although the advice of playing dead around a bear isn't fully inaccurate, it, once again, definitely requires some additional context. The current popular saying is, if it's brown, lay down, if it's black, fight back, and if it's white, good night. Not because you're supposed to play dead, but because you're going to be dead. As you continue to lay motionless on the ground, you peek open one of your eyes to see what's going on. You notice that the black bear has dropped your friend and was distracted by something else, and luckily left you both alone. Your friend, while a little bit worse for wear, is still alive, and you help get him back on his feet, and you once again continue your journey. Feeling a bit bad for your friend, because at this point it looks like he survived 3 rounds with Mike Tyson, 4 days with Diddy, and 5 nights at Freddy's, you decide you would let him take a quick breather and go around gathering some food. Your friend sits down on a rock under a tree, and you decide to go and see what you can find. And once you begin wandering around looking, you realize one crucial thing. You have no idea what's edible or not. and you don't even know what's around you. But that doesn't stop you from looking. And quickly, you find yourself approaching some interesting red mushrooms. Now, you know mushrooms can definitely be questionable, but the fact that you see a little snail munching away at these gives you hope. And as you pick these mushrooms, you notice that there's actually small bite marks from chipmunks. This gives you all the confidence you need to pick a few mushrooms and put them in your pocket and to continue scavenging. You continue looking around when you notice a small bush with inconspicuous red berries. You've never seen these berries before, but it doesn't mean that you can't eat them. And while you're cautious of these mysterious red berries, you notice a small bird fly down into this bush and carefully eat these berries before flying away. And once again, you rationalize with yourself, well, if this animal can eat this, obviously I can. If something was poisonous to them, they wouldn't eat it. So you go ahead and collect some of these berries as well. And you notice that you've been scavenging for hours, so you decide to return to your friend and show him your loot. Your friend doesn't seem too enthused by the small handful of random mushrooms and red berries, but something is better than nothing. And you and your friend begin to munch on the world's weirdest trail mix. Feeling energized from the food and also feeling energized mentally that you finally had some knowledge that was true, you and your friend both have a bit more of a pep in your step because you knew that you had at least some right information, right? That is until you realize your friend is looking in two directions and he is foaming at the mouth. In shock, you try to say something to him when all you can get out is a jumbled mess of slurred words, and you and your friend both pass out face down on the forest floor. The survival technique of eating what animals ate failed you both. And the reality is, animals are just better than you. And just because the animal can eat it doesn't mean you can eat it at all. Just think about it. Every animal has developed its own unique way of digestion, and the things that our bodies are able to safely process and consume typically come from thousands and thousands of years of consumption. And on top of this, some animals are just built different. Like cows, for example, they have 4 stomachs, and every animal processes the same foods differently. The bird that ate those red berries, for example, was able to pass the toxic seeds from those berries directly through its digestive system without any issues. And those seeds that are now a part of its excrement are now replanted and continuing the life cycle of those berries. But in your case, those seeds have been cracked open by your teeth and are now infecting your entire body with deadly toxins. And the chipmunk that was taking bites out of that small red mushroom has a specialized stomach acid that can neutralize the toxins within this deadly mushroom. However, you simply do not have the facilities to handle that. And the same mushroom that gives that chipmunk life gave you and your friend a near-death experience. Just because you saw an animal eating something does not mean it's not deadly for you. After a few hours being passed out on the floor, you and your friends slowly come to and pick yourselves up off the ground. Nonetheless, you and your friend decide it's time to get serious because the sun is soon setting and you guys need to eat food. You and your friend notice something fuzzy in the distance, and as you slowly approach it and peek over some bushes, you see a lonely old caribou walk slowly until it collapses right before your eyes. And while this is an unfortunate sight for you and your friend, this could be life or death. And in this instance, having an endless supply of high quality food in front of you is something you and your friend couldn't have even imagined. You both approach the caribou to ensure that it's no longer with you. And once you have that confirmation, you begin to prepare the animal. Fortunately, for once, you were able to put useful knowledge to good use. And shortly after preparing the animal, you and your friend are sitting at a campfire under a tree, under the stars, eating your first meal in what feels like forever. But as good as having a hearty meal feels, and as confident as you feel knowing you have a nearly endless supply of food, the reality is that you're not set for food at all. And while you might not realize it now, in the near future, eating this food alone could easily kill you. And the reason is simple but interesting. And it all comes down to biology. Your body simply can't digest protein without fat. And if your diet only consists of protein with no other micronutrient, your body could literally starve or develop protein poisoning. The term for this situation is called rabbit starvation, or the French-Canadian term caribou sickness. But they both refer to the protein poisoning I just mentioned. But the reality is if you are only eating direct, big game, lean protein, you are setting yourself up for failure. And it's because of this very real caribou sickness that beavers were extremely valuable to North American indigenous people, because beavers had such high amounts of fat, which is why beaver hunting and trapping was so important, not just for pelts, but also for fat, so that this fat could be consumed, allowing your body to properly digest the protein from the big game you also caught. Black bears are also a great source of animal fats, although it's much easier to trap a beaver than a black bear, for reasons we discussed earlier. But yeah, if you tried to live solely off of a big game carcass, you would soon find yourself suffering from a strange form of starvation, simply because your body needs protein, but it also needs other macronutrients to properly absorb and process this protein. Luckily for you and your friend, you're both blissfully ignorant to this fact, and you wouldn't be eating off this carcass for long enough to experience these symptoms. And after both of you have successfully filled your bellies, you decide that it's time to get some rest. You suggest to your friend that maybe you guys should build a quick shelter, just something to keep you guys safe. But your friend tells you that that's a waste of time and energy, and that you guys need to conserve your calories as much as possible right now. And you both simply lay down on the ground and close your eyes to sleep. But that sleep isn't peaceful at all. And only a few hours into your sleep, you wake up freezing cold, colder than the air temperature outside, and you're kind of at a loss. And the reason is rather simple. Laying directly on cold ground is a great way to rapidly reduce your body heat. Literally because the ground is stealing heat from your body and lowering your core body temperature, causing you to burn more calories to try to heat yourself back up, while also absorbing all of the extra heat that your body is generating. So in a cold environment like the one that you're in at night, you could not only lose body heat, but also experience hypothermia just by laying on the bare ground, which is why you'll see outdoorsy people swear by a ground mat. Consider it insulation to keep your body heat within you and not being stolen by the ground beneath you. And now that you understand that collecting debris to lay on is a worthy investment of calories, you quickly put together a bundle of grass and leaves to make something soft, but also to make something to insulate your body heat. And you make a makeshift mattress that's large enough for both you and your friend. And you roll your friend onto it, you lay beside him, conserving body heat, and you close your eyes and experience your first bit of rest. The following morning, you decide it's time to start your day and continue your adventure. You begin to inform your friend about last night's discovery and how sleeping on the ground is not okay. But before you can even finish making your point, your friend stops you and points ahead. Because what stands in your way is something you haven't noticed until now. A massive snow-capped mountain. And there's no way around it. You and your friend now need to begin hiking. Luckily, you and your friend are energized from a good night's sleep and at least some sort of food that doesn't almost kill you. And as you and your friend begin to climb through this mountain, the temperatures begin to get lower and lower. And it's at this point when you're able to make the point to your friend that body temperature is something you guys need to keep in mind in these survival situations. But as your friend brushes off your concern about body temperature, he tells you the only thing you guys should be concerned about right now is water. You begin to get nervous because now that you're halfway up this mountain and surrounded by snow, there's no water around you. But your friend laughs at you and reminds you that this snow is water. He grabs a handful of snow off the ground, which appears to be untouched, and begins to chow down on his solid water. And while to most this seems completely safe and logical, this is definitely not the most ideal way to consume water. The first risk that this poses is that this snow or ice could actually cause micro tears or cuts in your mouth, which could definitely cause problems down the line. But more importantly than that, consuming ice directly is a surefire way to lower your core body temperature, causing your body to work overtime to heat itself back up. Your friend may think that body temperature isn't an important ordeal, but you know that it's nothing to laugh at. And at this very moment, hypothermia is a much bigger risk to you than being dehydrated. But unfortunately, your friend is in a bit of a pickle. Because yeah, he was able to hydrate himself through all of the snow he just ate, but he's now shivering uncontrollably and he's hungrier than he was yesterday because his core body temperature has been lowered and his body is consuming as much calories as it can to heat itself back up. Now, you're thirsty as well, but you're not willing to go through that entire experience. And what you do is a lot more wise. You remember watching the Outdoor Boys YouTube channel, and luckily you had the same supplies that he did. You scoop up snow into some sort of metal tin, you put it over top of a propane heater, and you allow the snow to melt, and then you consume the pre-melted, ideally room temperature water, allowing your body to not have to reheat it once it's consumed. Your body can simply use it as is. And the benefit of using this method as well too, assuming you have access to some sort of heat source, is you can actually kill any bad bacteria. But assuming that's not a risk here, you're able to at least avoid the whole hypothermia your friend is now fighting. After this whole water debacle, you realize that your friend's only chance of regaining any sort of heat is by continuing to move. So you keep on your path going over the snow-capped mountain. And fortunately, your friend is no longer shivering, but you and your friend are now facing a much different issue. You and your friend are now both sweating, which is good. Body heat at this point is not a concern at all. This shouldn't be an issue. And sure, you might smell a little bit later, but what is an issue is the base layer of what you and your friend are wearing. Before you even left, you and your friends were debating on whether or not you should wear your clothes in a certain order. And your friend, obviously being a bit more reckless, said it didn't matter at all. So he started by putting on a cotton undershirt, a cotton hoodie, and then put a jacket over top that was waterproof to help keep water out. You, on the other hand, wanting to be different, decided to wear a base layer that was more moisture wicking, but still followed that up with another hoodie and a waterproof jacket. Now here's the difference. While you and your friend are still sweating now, as soon as you guys stop and your body heat begins to go down, the sweat trapped in your clothes is going to be deadly. And if your base layer is made of cotton, that sweat isn't going anywhere anytime soon. And after hours of hiking, you and your friend decide to take a break, and you guys experience the effects of this firsthand. After only sitting for around 15 minutes, your friend is not only cold once again, but he is shivering worse than he was before. And like I mentioned, that's because now his cotton shirt is drenched with sweat. And when cotton gets wet, it loses its ability to insulate you, meaning that your friend has effectively put a cold conductor directly on his body, and also effectively removed a layer, making him at risk once again for hypothermia. Luckily for you, you unintentionally decided to dress and act appropriately. You didn't wear a cotton base layer, meaning that by the time you already sat down and relaxed, your shirt was slightly wet in your armpits, but the rest of your shirt was able to dry relatively quickly. And also, as you were hiking up the mountain, you decided to remove layers, allowing yourself to not get too hot or sweaty. And that is the reason why you're not experiencing hypothermia right now. Because as you can tell, getting sweaty in a cold survival situation could be life or death. And a good rule of thumb is, if it's cold enough to wear multiple layers, it's too cold to wear a cotton-based layer or cotton at all. And while it may seem counterintuitive to remove layers when you're in a cold environment, if you are exerting energy and on the verge of sweating, it is best to remove these layers to prevent sweating as much as you can. As thick as your friend's plot armor is, he is struggling at this point, and still somehow alive. He is dealing once again with hypothermia, and you guys have no access to fire or anything to warm him up. Your friend randomly asks you if you have any alcohol on you, and coincidentally, you did. You had a small bottle of some pretty strong alcohol in your backpack, and you wondered why he wanted it. But before you could even ask him what he wanted it for, he grabbed the bottle out of your hands and chugged it. After wiping his mouth, he tells you that obviously drinking alcohol warms you up. It makes you feel warmer and increases your body temperature. And while I believe this is a myth we've all heard, it's been debunked numerous times, and it also is completely counterproductive. The origin of this myth is actually interesting and comes from a Saint Bernard dog that was carrying a brandy flask around its neck, and this dog was saving people that was buried in the French Alps. And unfortunately, this brandy may help you feel better, but definitely won't make you better. If you've experienced the alcoholic beverage, then you've probably noticed the sensation at some point of warmth. And this isn't because the alcohol is raising your body temperature, it's actually because the alcohol is making your blood vessels dilate, stimulating the nerve endings in your skin. But it doesn't actually increase your body temperature. And if you are in a cold environment that is specifically life or death, this dilation of the blood vessels will cause your body temperature to fall, and likely cause you to die much faster than you would have if you just stayed sober. So although alcohol may give you the simulation of warming up and potentially take your mind off of the pain you're in, it's definitely not doing you any favors in the survival department. Realizing the severity of the situation, you come to the conclusion that you need to get out of this mountain quick. And while your friend is incapacitated and breaths away from death, you realize your best bet was to turn your friend into a toboggan and ride him down the mountain like Mrs. Kwan in the Cat in the Hat movie. And in only a few minutes, you went from the top of a snow-capped mountain to a place you weren't in yet. You weren't in the forest anymore. You were on a beach. And luckily, it was warm enough to help you and your friend feel better, and you noticed that you were on an ocean. And this ocean could be your ticket to freedom. With both you and your friend being on your last brain cells, you both intuitively build a raft with absolutely no plan of going anywhere and no knowledge on any sort of nautical construction. Regardless, you make a makeshift raft and set sail, hoping that maybe somebody on the water will see you and save you. After hours of sitting on your raft, you and your friend are once again hungry. And while your friend is still sobering up, you decide your best bet is to look for some fish. You take a dive off your raft and you find yourself surrounded by a school of fish, but you're unable to catch any. That is, when you look through the school of fish and notice that a large shadow is approaching you. This isn't a big fish. This is a shark, and it's coming directly for you. You have nanoseconds to try to decide what your next move would be. And the first thing that comes to mind is movies and TV shows showing you that if you punch a shark, you're gonna be all right. So quickly and intuitively, as the shark approaches you, you don't move out of the way, you simply assume a karate stance and prepare to punch the shark. Now here's the deal. If you were actually going to go through with this, there's two likely outcomes. The first is that you are able to successfully punch the shark and scare it away, similar to the black bear, making it seem like you're not worthy prey. But the more likely outcome is that you extend your arm and have your arm ripped off by a shark, and then have the rest of your body consumed shortly after. Underwater, you have almost no strength whatsoever. Like, just try throwing a full force punch next time you're in a pool underwater. It's gonna do almost nothing. And besides this, sharks are ruthless killing machines. Even if you could throw your strongest punch at a shark, it's not going to be phased. Combine that with your lack of agility in the water and the shark's endless agility in the water, your strike effectiveness in even misdirecting the shark is extremely low. If a shark was in your area, you could easily push it out of your way or misdirect it by pushing its head if you had the leverage to do so, but even that is potentially risky. But in the situation when a shark is coming at you with the intent of damage, your best bet is to attack sensitive areas, specifically by plunging your thumb into the shark's eye or gills. Really, the only two areas where you can cause significant damage and at least make the shark retreat temporarily. And so, in a last-minute split decision, you decide not to punch the shark, but to actually poke it in the eye, causing the shark to cry and turn around, leaving you alone, and giving you the chance to climb back on the raft with your friend. At this point, you and your friend have been through hell and back. Your friend more so than you, but you are both now laying on your back, looking up at the sky, exhausted. And at this point, accepting your fate and understanding that maybe this trip was a mistake. And as you slowly close your eyes and take what appear to be your last few breaths, you notice a white light appear in your vision. A light that is so bright and so inviting. And you hear a noise, an almost angelic noise. And before you get the chance to meet your maker, you are hit in the testicles by a rope ladder that was dropped on your raft. And you realize that this light was a spotlight from the same helicopter that dropped you off. And while the pain you are experiencing is unbearable, you realize that you and your friend are finally saved. You both climb the ladder and board the helicopter and feel like you have been given a second chance at life. As you both are flying home with the crew, the pilot asks you how your trip was and if you guys were able to enjoy the park that they left you in only a few miles out of town. And you and your friend look at each other and decide that it's better if you kept your stories to yourself and just told them you guys had fun, but that you wouldn't be returning anytime soon. The secret meaning behind every dream. Picture this. You tuck yourself into bed, getting cozy, ready for a well-deserved night's sleep, when almost instantly after closing your eyes and falling asleep, you find yourself having the most odd dream of all time. This dream is so vivid, in fact, that you wake up, remembering almost everything about this dream that you were just having. At first, this dream seems random and devoid of any meaning, but you decided to take a peek to see if it could possibly mean anything. And after taking a quick look on Google, you realize that you are not the first person to have this dream, and that there are many interpretations on what it could possibly mean. Chances are, if you're watching this video, you've had a similar experience, which is why I wanted to describe all of the most common dream themes in one video. Dreams are so cool, but I think it's important to understand why we even dream in the first place. And to put it as briefly as possible, when we go to bed and rest our conscious minds, our subconscious minds are going to work to process all of the information from that day, trying to make sense of the world and everything that we experienced. Just imagine if every time you went outside and did something, you wrote down everything you saw and everything you did on a sticky note. By the end of the day, you would have a lot of sticky notes. And those sticky notes would probably need to be organized. That is what your subconscious mind is doing when you are sleeping. But what's interesting about that is that your subconscious mind does not speak the same language as you. Your conscious mind understands language and logic, although your subconscious mind understands the world through a different means, feelings, images, and metaphors. And that alone is a big reason why your dreams seem so random. I think social worker and sleep expert Suzanne Bergman described dreams best when she said, quote, "Dreams are a universal language, creating often elaborate images out of emotional concepts." But with that being said, although there is no solid scientific connection between certain dreams and specific emotional states, there is definitely implied meanings behind a handful of very common dreams. And in this video, I'm gonna describe every single one of them. Let's begin. Dreaming of falling. I would bet money that almost everybody watching this video has had a similar experience to this. You go to bed, you lay down, you close your eyes, and you begin to feel yourself falling asleep. But just before you could fall fully asleep, your body jolts and you are woken up instantly. Now, I mentioned this one first because it is the most common dream of all time. And it's interesting because this jolt that actually wakes you up out of your dream isn't necessarily always associated with falling, although in most cases it is. And whether this spasm was accompanied by a dream or not, it still is the same thing. It is called a hyptic jerk, and it is actually an arousal of our primal instinct that allows us to quickly get up out of sleep and defend ourselves in a dangerous situation. Another place you actually see this response a lot is when people prank people that are sleeping. You'll notice that these sleeping people that are being pranked will quickly get up and assume some sort of offensive position, and it will typically take time for their mind to catch up to what their body's already doing. That is a major difference between the subconscious and conscious mind. But going back to the falling part of this dream, why do people dream about falling specifically? Just think about it. When you are falling, you are in likely the most vulnerable state you can be in. You are simply at the whim of gravity, waiting for whatever the outcome of this fall may be to happen. So for that reason, falling is a pretty good metaphor for feeling like you're losing control in your life, or at least fearful or anxious of losing that control. And this control could be anything. You could feel like you're losing control to bad habits. You could feel like you're losing control of who you truly are. You could feel like you're losing control of your life because your school schedule is so packed or your job is too overbearing. There are a plethora of life situations that could cause you to feel these feelings, but in most cases, when people experience a dream of falling, the most common interpretation of this is that the person experiencing that dream is feeling anxiety, fear, and most prominently, a sense of losing control, being chased. Falling was definitely the most commonly reported dream, but I can only imagine that being chased was a close second, because for me personally, this is a dream that I've had throughout my entire life. And I would imagine you've had a similar dream as well. And the deeper or secret meaning behind this dream is actually pretty self-explanatory. And the commonly accepted meaning is that this dream is a feeling of avoidance. In the dream that you experienced, you could have been chased by a murderer, a monster, a killer, an animal, a bear, whatever it may be, but no matter what was chasing you or in what scenario, the usual suspect for this chasing dream to even come about is because of an inner conflict that you either subconsciously or maybe even consciously know that you're avoiding. And even with this small bit of context, things may start to make a bit more sense. Like for example, if you go to bed tonight and you just dream that you're being chased by a bear, you're going to wake up thinking you had a nightmare and it was random. But if you understand the context that typically in dreams where you're being chased, you are reminding yourself that there is an internal conflict that you have not resolved, then you can kind of put back the pieces and realize that, oh yeah, I wasn't really dreaming about a bear. My mind was just symbolizing the fact that I am totally avoiding dealing with X, Y, or Z in my life. And once again, there's a million things that you could be avoiding that you know you have to face. But because your subconscious mind is extremely creative and doesn't speak English, you end up getting a murderer or a bear chasing you in your sleep. Teeth falling out. We're starting to get a bit more niche here, but this is actually another dream that I have personally experienced. In my specific situation, I was just dreaming that I was in the bathroom and I looked in the mirror. And as I looked in the mirror, my teeth were extremely loose and I was actually able to touch them and they were just falling out. Obviously, this dream was rather disturbing and it grossed me out, and when I woke up, I remembered it vividly and was pretty unsettled by it. So unsettled that it caused me to actually Google what this could possibly mean. And it was that entire experience that later inspired this exact video. But with that being said, what could teeth falling out mean in a dream? Does it mean that you subconsciously know you need to brush your teeth more? And while in most cases that isn't the case, I would say that's definitely not impossible either. Like I said, this is all interpretation. And for example, if you did know that you had to brush your teeth and you weren't, and you dreamt about it, that could very well be the reason why. But in most cases, why people dream of their teeth falling out is much deeper and much more severe. In short, dreams of losing teeth is most often linked to stress, fear, and uncertainty. At this point, a common theme, but it goes a bit deeper. In some beliefs, teeth symbolize stability and security. So if your mind is creating dreams where this symbol of security and stability is just falling out of your mouth, that could be a representation of how you feel in your waking life. Do you have a pain that you are just simply not addressing, or are you simply stressed out? Any of these situations could potentially cause you to have a dream about losing your teeth. And if you've personally ever experienced a similar sort of dream, think about what was going on in your life during the time, and if there was anything that you could pinpoint that could have potentially caused this dream. Losing your hair. Similar to the situations we discussed previously with losing your teeth, a dream about losing your hair can typically be caused by similar experiences, although there's a bit of a twist. Because where teeth in some places represent stability and security, hair represents beauty and youth. And in that context, a dream about losing your hair is typically associated with a feeling of stress or vulnerability around someone's self-esteem, whether it be the fear of aging or an insecurity of your personal looks, potentially triggered by some sort of bullying. And while this niche interpretation seems logical, there's also more general associations around having a hair loss dream, specifically feeling like you're losing control of some aspect of your life or feeling, once again, vulnerable. Already, we're starting to see a common theme among different dreams, but I think it's important to reiterate these things and also highlight the differences and nuances. Drowning. Drowning may be one of the most unsettling of the common dreams we're going to be discussing in this video, because I think the situation for many, myself included, is a true worst possible fear, which just makes the lifelike situation, your dream, feel even more unsettling. Regardless, if you have experienced this dream, what could it possibly mean? And similar to the first dream we discussed of falling, drowning has a very similar interpretation, specifically feeling either overwhelmed or, once again, out of control in your life. But it does go a bit deeper than that, because drowning is typically associated with a feeling of being smothered. And while there is an endless amount of things that could make you feel smothered in life, these dreams are typically triggered by either a situation that is so overbearing, emotions that are at this point too strong to care anymore, or responsibilities that you have that you feel like are literally drowning you. Drowning, like falling, is another situation where you are completely out of control. It's you versus Mother Nature. And while you may not be falling, waiting to hit the ground, with drowning, I think it might almost be worse because you are consistently fighting against the waves in the water, just trying to stay afloat, knowing that eventually you're going under. If you've personally experienced a drowning dream, try to reflect. Was this around a time where you felt overwhelmed by something in your life? Potentially you just had too much on your plate with school, sports, life, family, friends. Maybe you were going through something really tough and the emotions were just too much to bear at times. Like I mentioned, all of these dreams are different interpretations, and they could also be triggered by a number of life situations. But most typically, drowning is interpreted as feeling overwhelmed and out of control. Fighting dreams are very common, but also, interestingly, very intense. Now, that sounds a bit odd to say on this list where most of these dreams are intense, but I think out of all of them, fighting is some of the most intense because it literally activates the neurochemicals that would activate your fight, flight, or freeze response. But that being said, if you have this dream about fighting, what does it mean? And there's actually, obviously, a lot of interpretations, but there's a few primary ones depending on who you're fighting. If you have a dream about physically fighting somebody that you know in your daily life, let's say this is a friend of yours, that dream would typically be symbolic that you have some sort of unsettled trauma or dispute or negative emotions that have not been fully sorted out. And this dream could be your subconscious mind trying to remind you that we need to do something about the situation. And I think this interpretation is somewhat obvious. I think this is one of those dreams that you don't necessarily need to Google. Like if you had a dream about fighting your friend and you knew that this friend owed you money, you could be able to put two and two together. Although if you had this dream and you didn't think you had any issue with your friend, but then you sat and thought about it and realized that, oh, actually, last time I saw this guy, he said something that rubbed me the wrong way, but I kind of let it slide. Maybe this might be a good opportunity to bring that situation up to him and be like, hey, that thing, whatever the case may be. Now, here's where things get interesting. If this person in your dream that you are fighting is not somebody that you know or recognize, or maybe doesn't even have a face at all, they're like a character that you haven't unlocked yet, what this typically symbolizes is that you have some internal conflict that you are trying deeply to resolve. And this could go for a lot of things. Perhaps you're at a crossroads in your life and you don't know which way to go. This dream could be representing your indecision. Or perhaps you're doing something that you know you shouldn't be doing, or you're not doing what you should be doing. This dream, once again, could interpret your better self trying to bring you out of a slump, but you're fighting a version of yourself that is still falling into bad habits. And when you get into dream lore, you kind of learn about something known as the shadow self, which is essentially a subconscious version of you, but that may be kind of beyond the scope of this video. Regardless, fighting dreams almost always symbolize an internal conflict, whether that be an internal conflict against yourself, a situation you're facing, or even how you feel about another person. And depending on who you're fighting, that could be a major clue into what kind of situation you are subconsciously dealing with. Being naked in public. Okay, this one isn't just a dream, it's the dream. Totally joking, but I'm glad that this one isn't as tense as the other ones, although the meaning is still just as serious. I think this is another one of those dreams that isn't necessarily extremely difficult to try to decode on a surface level, but there are some nuances that we'll get into. I think intuitively we kind of all understand that a dream of being naked in a public place can be symbolic for feeling vulnerable, but I think even taking it a step deeper than that, this imagery can be symbolic of insecurities that you're feeling, a need for acceptance, or potentially a fear of judgment or criticism. If you're at a place in your life where you feel like you are under immense pressure and being judged and criticized at every move, you may be dreaming of being naked because for how much you're being judged in your day-to-day life, you might as well just be naked because everybody looks at you so weird and sees you as alien, or at least that may be how your subconscious mind, understands that criticism. When you get criticized or called out, you feel exposed. You feel literally vulnerable and alone, and the same sort of situation exists when you are naked in public. You're the only person with no clothes on and everybody's looking at you. This dream is funny to think about, but it's definitely an uncomfortable dream to have, and it's once again rooted in some pretty serious negative emotions. Being pregnant. Now, this is specifically if you're having a dream about being pregnant while not being pregnant. I think if you're pregnant and have a dream about being pregnant, you're just having a dream. I don't think there's necessarily a special meaning there, but interestingly, it's said that this dream isn't necessarily limited to just women, and that men could also have this dream of being pregnant. And if you're a man who has had this dream, drop it in the comments. But this is also the first dream that we've discussed that doesn't have a negative connection to it, actually, which is a nice change of pace. And dreams of being pregnant typically symbolize new beginnings, personal growth, or the anticipation of a significant life change. And if you look at it that way, it kind of makes sense why your subconscious mind would illustrate these things as pregnancy. If you think about pregnancy, it's a similar thing. It's a new beginning. There is literally personal growth, and there is a huge life change coming. And I guess with all of these dreams, or potentially any dream you could have, if you understand the context that that a dream is just your subconscious mind that communicates through images and feelings trying to understand the world, then you can almost reverse engineer these things to see what's really going on. And it's that exact reverse engineering process that's given us all of these kind of interpretations, because like I mentioned, they're interpretations. They're not scientifically proven. They're just commonly accepted representations. And so far, I think a lot of them make sense. And for some of them, I've experienced exactly the situation and the exact feelings that they've described. So if you're a woman who's had a dream about being pregnant, or if you're a man who's had a dream about being pregnant, understand that this isn't necessarily a bad thing. And it doesn't just mean that you're going to be pregnant in the near future. I mean, potentially it could mean that depending on what you believe or how you interpret it, but in most cases, it's just a simple representation of personal change, personal growth, and new beginnings either ongoing or in the near future. Death. Taking almost a 180 from dreams of being pregnant, we have dreams of dying. Now, interestingly, dreams of dying have typically very similar associations to dreams of being pregnant, which is why I put them side by side. Now, on the surface, a dream of yourself personally dying could be one of the scariest and most upsetting dreams you can have. And in some cases, and in some cultures, this dream is taken literally, and it means that, oh, this is a sign that I'm gonna die soon. Which, I mean, depending what you believe, I mean, maybe it could be the case, but in most instances, that isn't the case at all, and that's typically not what your subconscious is trying to tell you. Similar to how your subconscious mind illustrates a new beginning as a pregnancy, your brain could also take the same input and illustrate death. But this isn't necessarily the death of you, this could be the death of a chapter in your life. Whether it be you start a new relationship, you end a relationship, you start a new job, you start thinking a different way, you start working out, whatever major life change is happening in your life, there is a death of the old version of yourself, and potentially even the death of something in your life, like a job or a schooling system or whatever the case may be. So it's interesting to think, if you've ever had a dream of yourself personally dying, is there anything that was going on at the time that was a big pivotal moment for you that ended up being ideally positive? This dream could have been extremely scary and you might have even considered it to be a nightmare, but perhaps your mind wasn't necessarily representing your death, but it was representing the death of something in your life. Now, that kind of goes out the window if your dream was, you know, you getting murdered or hit by a car. Like, I feel like depending on how gruesome your death was, potentially there's more going on there, and it kind of leans into some of the other things we've discussed with, you know, with feeling out of control and feeling stressed out and overwhelmed. I would say if you had a gruesome death, you're probably not like, yeah, this is a new beginning. This is why I dreamt of getting hit by an 18-wheeler. Like, I don't think that's the connection, but yeah. It's typically believed that symbolically, a dream of death can be the metaphor of a chapter of your life closing, allowing a new chapter to begin. Meeting a lost loved one. If you've ever lost a loved one, whether it be a parent, a grandparent, a sibling, whoever it may be, then you've probably had a dream about them at some point after their passing. And you've maybe even wanted to dream about them just to have more communication with them. Now, with this specific, very sensitive issue, there is a lot of interpretations and beliefs surrounding them. And while that obviously goes for all of these entries, I want to make that explicitly clear for this one as well. For people who have had a dream of meeting a loved one once again after their passing, it's typically believed that this dream is symbolic of an individual reflecting on the relationship that they had with this lost individual, or potentially even them grieving this lost individual and desiring a deep connection with them once again. And like I mentioned, it makes sense if you think about it. If you've lost a loved one and, you know, that is just gone now, your subconscious mind is going to have to do a lot of work to try to comprehend what that even means. And that person may be interjected into your dream as a result. And some interpretations include that if you meet a lost loved one in your dream, that is that lost loved one specifically trying to contact you, or I guess successfully contacting you to let you know that they have made it to the other side and that they are with you and whatever they may say to you in the dream, if they say anything at all. So this one is interesting because there's a lot of ways you could take it. It could be a representation of you trying to deal with the loss of this person and trying to understand your new relationship with them after them being gone, or it could even be them communicating with you from the other side. But whatever you may believe, it's interesting to understand these dreams and try to ponder them when they happen. But I do think this entry is likely the most self-explanatory on the list. You're dreaming about a lost loved one because you're thinking about a lost loved one. But regardless, it's a pretty straightforward dream. Although there's still a ton to unpack around it. Snakes. Before we get to the last common dream on this list, I just want to say that there is a ton more of crazy and common dreams I want to discuss. But time is limited for every video. So if you want a part 2 with more common dreams, either leave a like or leave a comment below letting me know that you want that video, and I'll be more than happy to make it. Oh, and if you're enjoying this video and watch us often, feel free to subscribe. It turns out a good majority of you guys aren't even subscribed, but if you enjoyed the video, you might as well. It's free, and I hear it gives you good dreams. But back to snakes. Snakes are one of the most interesting dreams I've researched for this video. Specifically simply because I could not get one solid read. Like I mentioned, every dream I discussed is open to interpretation, and there are plenty of interpretations, but typically there is an underlying common denominator. When it comes to snakes, literally everything was just straight up contradictory. Like even if you just Google, what does it mean if you dream about snakes? It will literally say in the same sentence, healing and hidden threats. But with that being said, what are some of the more common understandings of seeing snakes in dreams? And it really depends on the context you see this snake in. Now, if you see this snake in a neutral context and it's just kind of in an outdoor environment and you see it go by and it's not a negative experience, that could actually be a positive symbol, typically meaning transformation and healing, because snakes are known for shedding their skin, starting anew. That could be, once again, another symbol of rebirth, transformation, healing. That's pretty positive. But if you're having a dream where you're being chased by a snake, that kind of goes back to our initial dream of being chased. You feel like you are running away or being followed by something that you are avoiding that is at this point becoming overwhelming and needs to be dealt with. Now, a bit more nuanced, if you see a snake that's in your personal home or in a safe space where a snake should not be, and you are personally scared of this snake in this environment, then this may be a sign that in your life you are dealing with either hidden dangers or hidden threats from people in your life. You might feel like someone might not have your best interest in mind, whether it be a friend, a coworker, a peer, whoever it may be, or this snake might even represent something that you're doing to yourself. Once again, referring to that shadow work or that shadow version of yourself. So it's just interesting because snakes could represent a plethora of things. It really just kind of comes down to the context of which you see it. A snake in nature could represent rebirth. A snake chasing you could represent you avoiding an issue in your life. A snake in your house could represent you feeling unsafe or threatened. And a snake in your boot might mean that you're in Toy Story. The most haunted locations from around the world. I've touched on a lot of creepy things so far in this channel. Serial killers, mythical creatures, folklore, SCPs, but I've never discussed ghosts directly. But today, that changes. And I'm gonna answer all your questions about these haunted locations. Like, how did it become haunted? What ghostly encounters have been recorded? And are these places even really haunted? The year is 1835. And you have just been invited to a beautiful Christmas get-together at one of your friends' manors in the English countryside. The manor was just absolutely beautiful, and this party was packed with notable people. Respected colonels, wealthy businessmen, and high-ranking government officials. The night consisted of seemingly endless food and drinks and music, and everything was just so perfect. Late into the night, once the party started to die down, you and a group of friends decided that it was time to go to bed, and you all went your own separate ways to get to your bedrooms. You turn down a hallway and you're finally by yourself and only steps away from your bedroom, when you notice down this hallway there's this woman. A woman that was wearing only brown clothing. You didn't recognize this woman from the party, but this isn't your house, and you didn't know everybody at this party, so you figured it was somebody else also going to their room. This woman was slightly notable due to the apparel that she was wearing, but it was nothing out of the ordinary, and you continued to your room and had a good night's rest. You woke up the following morning on Christmas Eve and engaged in the morning festivities. The party was still not done. There was a huge brunch being served, and you and everybody else were not going to miss it. You sit down at a table with some of your friends, one of which being a colonel, and he mentions that last night he saw a rather peculiar woman. Another person at your table asks, what did she look like? And the colonel goes on to explain that on his way to his bedroom, he saw a woman dressed exclusively in brown robes. These robes were dated and tattered and had to have been at least from the previous century. It didn't look right at all. And the colonel was concerned because this woman might have been somebody who either snuck into the manor or was somebody who was obviously lost. But the colonel mentioned once he spotted this woman and walked closer to her and then tried approaching her, he realized this woman had turned around and he got a look at her face. And that's when he claimed that he saw this woman's bright white face with empty eye sockets, and the man was terrified. He didn't scream or run away, but he quickly made his way to his room without asking any more questions. Instantly, your heart dropped to your stomach because you also saw the same woman, but you didn't see her face. And before you could say anything, another woman at the table says, I also saw a lady dressed up in brown. I didn't see her face, but she was standing in the hallway, not saying anything and not moving. And your heart and stomach only sank deeper. You noticed that the host of the party was sitting beside you, and her face was in shock. You asked her, who is this lady wearing these brown rags? And she confessed that she had absolutely no idea. The Christmas party was a formal event and everybody was dressed in their absolute best. Nobody was wearing brown, and there was nobody in the party with sunken in, missing eyeballs. The host of this party quickly stands up on her chair and started clinking a spoon on her glass, causing the conversation in the room to a silence. And the host of the party asked, did anybody see a woman in brown robes anywhere in the manor last night? And to her dismay, numerous people in this room of nearly 100 people raised their hand. The story I just told is based on a real documented encounter that happened in 1835 at a Christmas party. And this story is significant because it is the first recorded sighting of the ghost that is now known as the Brown Lady at the iconic Raynham Hall. And this isn't the only sighting that's taken place, and it's probably not even the most iconic either. And only days after this event, when the host of the party made the staff aware of all of these claims, people literally quit their jobs and never returned out of fear of encountering this strange apparition. But that's not it. There was a handful of sightings on that night in 1835, but the following year in 1836, Captain Franklin Marryat, who is actually a friend of Charles Dickens, heard tell of the legend of this Brown Lady in the Raynham Manor and spoke to the owner directly and requested that he stay in the most haunted room of them all so he could prove that there was no ghost at all and that this legend simply came to be because the owner of this manor wanted to keep people away from his property. And let's just say he got more than he bargained for. This captain checked into the hotel and stayed in a room that literally had a painting of the apparition hung in the room. Like I mentioned, at this point, the Brown Lady was already a local legend and a common sighting within the hotel. And for the first 2 nights of his visit, the captain had a normal experience. He was staying in a hotel and rather comically was sleeping with a loaded revolver under his pillow just in case. And it was after the second night and the beginning of the third night when everything began to change. Because on night 3, Frederick didn't get a good night's sleep at all. What he did get was a run-in with the Brown Lady. Frederick had just gotten into bed and was ready to go to sleep when he noticed something in front of his door. The door never opened, but there was obviously a shadow of some sort in front of the door blocking the path. The shadow was moving and getting bigger until Frederick realized that this shadow was exactly what he was looking for. He quickly looked at the painting on the wall and noticed that this was the Brown Lady, and she was in his room and she was getting closer to him. Frederick grabs the revolver from under his pillow, points it at the apparition, and screams at the top of his lungs, "Stop! Don't come closer! I'm going to shoot!" But the Brown Lady grew a menacing grin and began to get closer, practically at the foot of his bed, when Frederick pulled the trigger, shot the revolver into the darkness, and the apparition disappeared. 3 hotel workers came into the room to ask what had just happened, and Frederick left the hotel and never returned. I tried to only tell one story per section, but I figured that story was kind of worth going into detail over. Over the late 1800s and early 1900s, there was a plethora of other run-ins with the Brown Lady, which brings us to Captain Hubert C. Provant, who not only had a run-in with the Brown Lady, but was able to capture a picture of her, a full-body apparition. And this photo is not only iconic to the Raynham Hall, but it's also one of the most iconic photos in all of ghost hunting. This photo was taken in 1936, and since this photo has been taken, sightings have been few and far between, although many people still believe to this day that Raynham Hall is haunted. Once again, just a crazy story, but you might be thinking, okay, sure, there's this ghost there, but who is this lady and how did she get there? And because this section's getting long, let me boil it down. According to the legend of the Brown Lady, the Townsend family, which was the family that owned the Raynham Manor, after numerous run-ins with this apparition, was able to identify her from one of the paintings that was displayed within the manor. The woman was named Dorothy Walpole, who lived from 1686 to 1726, and was the sister of Robert Walpole, who is considered the first ever Prime Minister of Great Britain. She was the second wife of Charles Townshend, one of the original Townsends that owned the manor, and this man was well known for having a short temper. Allegedly, this man had caught Dorothy with another man, a lord, and as punishment, he locked her in her room in the manor, and she was never allowed to leave. She wasn't allowed to see friends, family, or even her own children. She was a prisoner in her own home until 1926 when she passed away from smallpox. Obviously, that story is upsetting both ways, because if Dorothy did cheat, then that's awful. But Charles had absolutely no right to do any of that whatsoever. If somebody cheats on you, you just break up with them. You say, hey, you get out of my manor, we're done. You don't say, hey, I'm gonna trap you in this room until you die. To this day, Raynham Hall is one of the most iconic haunted locations in all of England. But this is one of the more tame entries on the list, and we're only just getting started. It's the mid-1800s, and you are a medical doctor, Dr. Charles Finney. You live in Atchison, Kansas, and you run a successful medical operation out of your home. This home was something your family recently commissioned, and now you were both living in it and making it your place of business, at least for now. And everything was going smoothly until one night. You were in bed, exhausted after a long day, with your eyes feeling like they're each 1,000 pounds, just begging to be closed. And as you're on the verge of sleep, about to drift off, you hear a knocking at your door. This was extremely uncommon. You obviously had no appointments in the dead of night, and you had no idea who this could be. Reluctantly, you get out of bed and head to your front door. And when you open the door, you notice a woman standing there, holding her young daughter. This woman is frantic and explains that her daughter is in severe pain, and she can't walk, can't move, and she is in endless, excruciating pain coming from her abdomen. The doctor's fatigue instantly wears off, and he's back in work mode. And he invites the woman and the daughter in and quickly takes them to his basement examination room, where he's able to identify the likely source of all of this pain, an inflamed appendix that was about to burst. The doctor informed the mother that this young girl needed emergency surgery now, and the mother agreed, saying, "Please, anything to save my daughter." The doctor quickly prepped the location, washed his hands, grabbed his tools, and then began to administer the anesthesia. Once everything was ready and the medicine was administered, the doctor hastily made the first incision. Although little did he know, the anesthesia that he had administered was an improper dose, and this girl, who was already in pain, was now in even more pain, as she could feel everything. And this incision that the doctor had just made was the final straw. Her body went into shock, and not long after, she passed away on that operating table. That young girl's name was Sally, and this story is the reason why this location is known as the Sally House. First thing I'm going to say right off the bat is, as interesting as that story is, there is absolutely no recorded evidence for that story actually being true. And it's largely regarded as a folktale, loosely based in reality. Dr. Charles Finney was a real doctor, and he worked in Atchison, Kansas. And he lived out of his practice that his family had recently commissioned. That all is true. But as far as the story of Sally is concerned, there was no physical evidence. But the reason I mention the story is because it is the story that is most associated with this haunted location. And this haunted location is one of the most iconic in all of the United States of America. So yeah, I wanted to make that distinction primarily because I knew if I didn't, others would say that's not actually true, and well, it's not proven either way, but it is highly debated and not proven that it did happen, so I'll let you make up your mind on that. That story is upsetting and sad, but what does it have to do with haunted locations? Well, that story is kind of where everything began, because after this incident that may or may not have happened in the late 1800s, experiences in the Sally House have been vast and plentiful. Some experiences only consist of hearing a creak or faint footsteps, or even the giggle of a young girl. But other encounters are a lot more sinister, with items being thrown, loud screams being heard, and even visitors being scratched to the point of bleeding. Nearly every former tenant or owner of the Sally House that had been interviewed alleged to have experienced paranormal activity of some sort, typically with consistent attributes across all of the accounts, with some even claiming to see Sally in the window at night when it was known that nobody was home. If you're watching this video, you're probably into the paranormal, which means you've probably seen some of your favorite ghost YouTubers stay in this house. Sam and Colby, Nick and Ryan, Exploring with Josh, or even large-scale TV productions. All of these people have stayed in the Sally House and had unique experiences. So for that reason, I'm not going to go too much more into detail. But I will say this, the Sally House hasn't been anybody's personal residence since the 1990s, and in more recent times has been a popular tourist attraction, which kind of makes you think, is the legend of the Sally House real? Or do people just want to keep the story alive because there's a financial incentive? Regardless, the Sally House is regarded as one of the most iconic haunted locations in the United States. The year is 1885. You and your wife are pioneers in New South Wales, Australia, and you have just finished building a double-story late Victorian-style manor on the top of a hill overlooking your local town. This was you and your wife's dream homestead, and you built it with your very own hands. The construction was a labor of love, and now you could enjoy this manor for the rest of your life. This manor became known as the Monte Cristo homestead, and you and your wife enjoyed it up until your deaths. After you and your wife were long gone and your family had no longer lived in the residence, the house essentially was left abandoned. There were caretakers, but unfortunately, the Monte Cristo homestead fell into disrepair. That was until it was purchased by another couple, Reg and Olive Ryan, and they were dedicated to building this beautiful manor back to its former glory, and that's exactly what they did. They took it from a derelict, abandoned home to something that was actually habitable. And once again, the homestead was a home again. And it wasn't long after Reg and Olive moved in that things began to get weird. One late night, only a few days after the Ryans had officially moved in, they were heading home after an event, when they noticed that as they approached their house, they could see bright lights beaming from inside the house, illuminating all of the windows. This caught Reg and Olive's attention, and they were both speechless at what they were looking at. Reg knew that the electricity wasn't even fully finished in the house yet, and for the places that did have electricity, he knew he left no lights on and no lamps burning. Olive was just in sheer terror, and the couple stopped halfway up their driveway in pure awe of what they were looking at. Their home illuminated in the middle of the night for no reason at all. Terrified, the couple approached the house, and the closer they got, the dimmer the lights got. And by the time they actually reached their new home, the house wasn't illuminated at all, and it was as dark as it should have been. The couple theorized that maybe they were just seeing the reflections of the headlight of their vehicle, but deep down they knew that wasn't what they saw at all. And this was only the beginning of the strange encounters that were going to take place over the next few years. Following this event, when the family decided to bring their family cat to their new home, instantly the cat was uncomfortable, which is common. This cat's in a new environment and was just in a car ride, something it didn't enjoy. But as soon as your wife put the cat on the floor, it arched its back and moaned in fear as if it was face to face with another cat. There was nothing there. The cat hissed and screamed and immediately ran out of the house. You, your wife, and your 3 daughters looked for the cat and never found your cat again. Following that event, there was numerous occasions where your daughters claimed that they could see a man's face out the window, which was impossible considering that all of your daughters had bedrooms on the 2nd floor, and there was never any unknown men near or around the property. The family frequently encountered disembodied voices and footsteps and noises, doors opening and drawers closing, and there was truly no explanation for any of it. After years of alleged strange and ghostly encounters, the homestead was converted into a museum, where it showcased antiques, local treasures, and became a tourist attraction with a gift shop, and became known as Australia's most haunted house. Since then, it was featured in numerous TV shows in the 70s, 90s, and early 2000s and 2010s. But very recently, in January of 2025, the homestead was actually closed to the public as Olive Ryan passed away. The Monte Cristo homestead is likely one of the most famous haunted houses in all of Australia. And whether or not the paranormal experiences actually happened to Reg and Olive, or if they just made up stories to have a way to make money off of the house they just restored, I'll let you decide. The year is 1907, and the Dutch have just finished building a beautiful office building for their railway developments in Indonesia. Why the Dutch had a rail company and headquarters in Indonesia is a different conversation. But regardless, this building existed, and it looks really cool, and operated until 1942. That's because the Japanese invaded Indonesia, and they wanted everything, including this beautiful office building. You might be asking yourself, did the Japanese just use it as their office building? Now it's their headquarters in Indonesia? And the answer is no, because once they had total control of this building, they turned an entire wing of the building into a dungeon, specifically for torture and executions, something that wasn't uncommon for the Japanese in World War II. From 1942 until 1945, the building was under Japanese control, until Dutch forces tried to overtake the building from the Japanese. And in October of 1945, a battle took place within the building from Dutch troops who entered through a tunnel underground. Although the Dutch weren't only fighting the Japanese, they were also fighting the Indonesians. And the battle lasted 3 days, and the Dutch eventually retreated. Once World War II ended, the Indonesian army took control of the complex, and it was restored and given back to the Indonesian Railway Company, not the Dutch Railway Company. And in 1992, it was officially considered cultural property of Indonesia. From 1992 until 2009, this building was essentially left to rot, and over this time, it was vandalized, and nature had begun to take it back, with mold growing, parts of the building collapsing and falling apart, and locals beginning to have interesting stories regarding this building. This building, with quite the history, is known as Lawang Sewu, and it is considered one of the most haunted locations in all of Indonesia. Lawang Sewu is very interesting, and its history alone is something to be researched and talked about. During the time that this building was left in disarray, many local teenagers would make it a challenge to touch the building, or go near the building, or go inside the building, or even in extreme cases, stay overnight in the building. This massive building with such a dark and long history became a bit of an icon for all the wrong reasons, and everyone essentially considered it to be an evil, haunted building with dark energy and dark spirits associated with it, which kind of makes sense. Like, just imagine how dark the energy is being in a building, knowing the history. The unspeakable things that happened in this building, I could only imagine left some sort of energetic residue. Regardless, this building became very popular with thrill seekers in Indonesia. And it was over this near 20-year stretch when this building was falling apart that people had many strange encounters within the walls. Hearing voices, hearing footsteps, seeing apparitions, being scratched, being touched. All of these took place within the walls. The Indonesian government actually had plans of restoring this building, but were hesitant to do so because they feared that nobody would use or interact with the building because of the fear associated with it being haunted. But against their better judgment, they continued with the restoration project. And from 2009 to 2011, the building was restored. And in 2013, the building was officially open for tours. And currently, it's a massive hit for tourism in the region of Java, Indonesia, and sees over 1,000 visitors every single day. Now, here's the thing that's kind of interesting about this building. The government has official plans plans to, quote, eliminate the spooky image in order to attract more visitors, which I think is interesting because that's kind of the opposite of what most ghost house owners want, right? Like they want to not only maintain but amplify the spooky image in order to bring in people. But I guess the difference is they are wanting to make this a historical landmark, but they are fearing that this image could scare people away, as especially in this region of the world, people are extremely superstitious when it comes to spirits. And there are plenty of locals that avoid this building entirely as they fear that going near or around this building could lead a spirit to follow you to your home and essentially bring you bad luck and negative energy. So yeah, Loang Sewu over the last 120 years has had a very long and interesting and unfortunate history, including colonization, war, torture, executions, and other unspeakable things, I'm sure. But as the government allowed this building to sit and rot, the locals decided to have some fun and found a little bit more than fun. And today, the government has restored this building to make it a historical landmark and are doing their best to make sure that nobody talks about the whole ghost part of this building, which is kind of funny. Definitely one of the more obscure entries in this list. Before we get to the last entry on this list, I just wanted to make a quick point. Originally, this video was supposed to have 10 entries, not 5. But because it takes so long to animate the stories associated with each of these sections, I decided to just essentially cut it in half. I didn't want to sacrifice the storytelling or the information for the sake of having more entries on the list. I say this because there is a ton of other crazy, obscure haunted locations that I want to talk about. So consider this video a part 1, and if you guys want that second part, leave a like or leave a comment and I will post another video about the craziest and most obscure haunted locations from around the world. Now, back to the final entry of this list. The year is 1776. You are a healthy adult man living in Venice, Italy. You have a beautiful wife and a newborn son, and unfortunately you are experiencing the harsh wrath of the plague. It's killed numerous friends and family members of yours, but fortunately you, your wife, and your son are safe. For now at least, because you have to work every single day to be able to afford to live. Your family depends on you, and you try to be as safe as possible. That is, until you catch the plague. At this point in time, the government had a protocol for anybody who had caught the plague. And your fate was to be sent to the island of Poveglia, an island that at this point the Italian government was using solely as a quarantine station for those with the plague and other diseases. And that is where you went. You weren't able to say goodbye to your wife or son as it would pose too much risk to them. And you felt confident that if you went to this island, you would quarantine and come back a healthy man and return to your family. But unfortunately, almost as soon as you were shipped to this island, you were never heard from again. Your son was able to grow up through the plague and survive it. As time went on, the plague began to go away. Things began to change. One of the bigger changes that happened was the Italian government was no longer using Poveglia as a quarantine station, but as a remote mental institution. And unfortunately, your son, through the trauma that he experienced growing up in the plague, losing his father, and other hardships that he had in his life, found himself also on the island of Poveglia. This time, not because of the plague, but because of a mental disorder that was at the time not understood. The island of Poveglia at this point had claimed the lives of multiple generations in your family. But sadly, this wasn't unique to your family. Tens of thousands of people had perished on Poveglia Island. And it's because of that dark and death-filled history that Poveglia Island is regarded as not only one of the most haunted locations in Italy, but one of the most haunted locations in the entire world. From the late 1300s until the late 1900s, this small island was inhabited by people and used for multiple different reasons. The two primary reasons, the quarantine station and the mental asylum. There was likely an unspeakable amount of atrocities that took place on this island, and it's for that reason that after it was abandoned, people gained quite the interest in visiting it. The mental hospital was the last official use of this island, but when that institution closed in 1968, not only the building went abandoned, but the entire island became abandoned, leaving the buildings, the belongings, and the history to marinate. But it didn't take long for history buffs and thrill seekers to check it out for themselves. And that's when the legend began to grow of how haunted Poveglia Island really was. I've actually watched a video of somebody not doing a ghost hunt here, but just exploring the island. I believe it was Exploring with Josh I watched, and it's kind of unfortunate because although the history of this island is rather dark, the architecture is still beautiful, and the island itself is really unique. I could only imagine it would be a cool tourist attraction, kind of like the Italian version of Alcatraz, you know, how that had a really dark history but became a popular tourist attraction. Even though this entire island has been off limits from the day it closed to today, it's not stopped people from going. And it appears that almost everybody who has gone there has come back with a story, which has led to numerous different paranormal TV shows and even paranormal YouTubers to explore the island for themselves. There are no real famous notable claims of hauntings or specific apparitions on this island. There is just a general consensus among people who have been there that there is no doubt that this island is haunted, which they back up with the history of the building itself. This is definitely an example of a haunted haunted location that I'd be more willing to take seriously simply because there's no financial incentive. This isn't something that somebody owns. Nobody's really gonna make money off of making a legend out of this. It is an abandoned building with a dark history that I'm sure the Italian government just wanted to kind of decay into nothingness. Common things science still can't explain. Fingerprints. That's right. The first entry on this list is something that we all have access to at our fingertips. And that's because it literally is our fingertips, or more specifically, our fingerprints. I think we all know that everybody has fingerprints, and beyond that, we all have unique fingerprints. And we also know that the fingerprints your cousin leaves on the glass in every device is really annoying. But beyond the existence and uniqueness of fingerprints, what is there not to know? And the answer is, well, the purpose of fingerprints to begin with. Interestingly, we actually know a lot more about the origin of fingerprints rather than the purpose of fingerprints. Obviously, in modern times, the fingerprint is an extremely useful tool, most commonly used in forensics investigations and also while opening your iPhone 6. And while those are definitely interesting use cases for our fingertips, the human body didn't spend hundreds of thousands of years just to develop fingerprints for biometric data purposes. And like the title of this video suggests, the true purpose of fingerprints is still relatively unknown, although there is two primary theories. But before we get into those, I want to actually explain quickly how we even get fingerprints in the first place. When you were a little fetus in your mother's womb, your fingerprints surprisingly were one of the earliest defining features developed on your entire body, obviously after your arms and hands. And these unique designs are carved into your fingertips through the pressure of amniotic fluid in your mother's womb. The pressure of this fluid, coupled with the growth rate of your fingers and other unique factors, are what cause the consistently unique design of your fingerprint, which is really interesting. Your fingerprint isn't genetic whatsoever, and identical twins do not share the same fingerprint. And that same fingerprint you develop early on in your mother's womb, you will keep until the day you die, which is also super interesting. But not quite as interesting as the two running theories on why we even have fingerprints in the first place. The first theory is that we have fingerprints to improve grip. This theory states that the grooves on your finger act like tread on a tire and are intended to allow you to grip, hold, and throw things easier. And this theory makes sense and is definitely valid, and there is even evidence to support this claim. And the other primary theory for why we have fingerprints is actually for tactile reasons. This theory states that we have fingerprints to help us sense vibrations and to feel textures more fully and effectively, enhancing our sense of touch. And once again, there is evidence to support this claim as well. And while both of these theories are valid and seem extremely logical, and both share evidence that can back up their claims, there's not yet any concrete evidence proving a specific purpose for your fingerprint. Alzheimer's. If you're watching this video, it's likely that you don't have Alzheimer's. But if you do have Alzheimer's, then it's likely you've seen this video before and just don't remember it. Regardless, Alzheimer's is unfortunately more common than you think, and most people watching this video have likely experienced Alzheimer's in one way or another. The reality of Alzheimer's is horrifying and truly upsetting, and that is coming from a bystander's perspective. I can only imagine the experience of somebody dealing with the trauma firsthand. But for how common Alzheimer's is and how much awareness is being brought to it these days, there are still so many things that are just completely unknown when it comes to Alzheimer's. I think it's important to note first and foremost that Alzheimer's and dementia are not the same thing, and while they are related, they're not interchangeable. And on top of that, Alzheimer's is not a natural part of human progression. While cognitive decline is normal as you age, the rapid and detrimental decline that happens with Alzheimer's is nowhere near normal. And for that reason, it's not called old-timers, it's called Alzheimer's. And I'm not even making this up. When I was a kid, I swear to God, I thought it was called old-timers because old people got it. And I'm just really hoping I'm not the only one who thought that. But tossing my own personal cognitive decline to the side, what is the cause of Alzheimer's? And the answer is complicated. As of today, the most common theory is that a combination of age-related brain changes, genetic factors, and environmental and lifestyle influences play a role in the development of Alzheimer's, although the exact biological root cause of the disease is still unknown. Basically meaning that there's a lot of ways you could potentially get Alzheimer's, like smoking all your life, or working shift work and having a bad circadian rhythm, or potentially being genetically predisposed. And while all of these may be a contributing factor, there's not yet one underlying causality. But with that being said, as of now, there are still two primary biomarkers that are believed to be tied to Alzheimer's. The first is amyloid beta plaques. And what amyloid beta plaques are actually buildup of amyloid beta, which is a part of amyloid precursor protein. What does amyloid precursor protein do in the brain, you might ask? Science doesn't know that either, but it's believed, but not proven, to have something to do with brain development. Regardless, patients with Alzheimer's will see this amyloid beta protein not being properly absorbed in the brain, causing it to clump together and create plaques. causing the eventual rapid decline in cognition. And the reason for this is because these amyloid plaques are actually toxic to the brain and cause cell death within your brain, which is why typically in Alzheimer's patients, you will see brains with massive holes in them, which honestly just adds a whole new layer of disturbing to this disease. But even the role of these amyloid plaques are debated, because recently there have been medications specifically designed to destroy these amyloid plaques in the brain. And unfortunately, these tests have not bred positive results, which has caused scientists to question whether or not this plaque is the root cause or simply a byproduct of a deeper, more unknown root cause. Oh yeah, and the other biomarker associated with Alzheimer's is another protein used in the brain known as tau. And similar to the other protein we just discussed, for patients with Alzheimer's, the tau in the brain is not used properly and is not absorbed and becomes tangled and creates, once again, toxic clumps in the brain, causing cell death and cognitive decline. So yeah, although it may seem like we know quite a bit about Alzheimer's, there's so much more we have to learn before we are able to make any sort of meaningful development in prevention and hopefully cure. Animal migration. Migration, by far, is one of the most underrated animal superpowers. Like, seriously, just imagine being able to be anywhere and being able to then navigate to a specific location, usually across an entire continent, just because. Migration is a necessary survival mechanism for countless species of animals. And it's actually really well understood why certain species migrate. The reason depends on the species, but the most common reasons for migration are either to feed, breed, or to escape harsh climates, like cold winters or hot summers. And that is simple and something we truly understand. But it's not the why of migration that's unexplained, it's the how. Like, just think about it. How do these animals know consistently year over year not only when to go, but exactly where to go? You could give a lot of people today a car and a physical roadmap and they would still get lost trying to go to a specific location. But if you just tell a butterfly that they've got to fly 2,000 miles to get laid, they're already gone before you could even tell them what direction to go. And it's so amazing, in fact, that we still, to this day, don't understand how animals know where to migrate, or more specifically, how to get to their point of migration. Birds, whales, sea turtles, and even insects are all examples of animals that migrate. And for most of them, the places they go to migrate are rather specific, although where they may be living in their off-season is kind of random. However, every year, they consistently know, no matter where they are, where to go. And that phenomenon is truly amazing. And while in 2025, humans have GPS, Google Maps, and now self-driving cars, we still get lost a lot. And this thought process has led researchers to believe that animals have something that we don't. And recent studies have shown that this could potentially be true. And one example that research has recently shown was that some species of birds, specifically pigeons, were able to sense the Earth's magnetic field. And first of all, I'm just curious how they even found this out in the first place. Like, I can only imagine two scientists just sitting a pigeon down in the lab, looking at him and just asking, "Do you feel anything?" With the pigeon only to respond, "North." And this is a skill known as magnetoreception. And I'll be honest, I wish I had magnetoreception, because that sounds cool as hell. Regardless, with the discovery of pigeons being able to sense the Earth's literal magnetic field, this one answer has led to many more questions. Like, how many other animals share this ability? And what other abilities exist in the animal kingdom that we don't even know about yet? And for animals with this ability, how do they even use this knowledge of the magnetic field to navigate properly and accurately? It's truly amazing. And I guess the human equivalent of this would be trying to understand how your broke, drunken uncle always makes his way down to Florida every time winter comes in Michigan. Like, your drunken uncle could be anywhere in the northern hemisphere for 7 months out of the year. But somehow, as soon as it just gets a little chilly, he teleports to Florida. But nobody knows how he got there. It's just like that. The placebo effect. The placebo effect is a staple in modern medicine testing because of how prevalent this effect is. To summarize the placebo effect, it's essentially just suggestibility. It's your mind believing something to be true and your body kind of following suit. And while that's a bit of an oversimplification, the results of the placebo effect are amazing, but also mysterious. The placebo effect is so strong and so common that anytime a new drug is tested to bring to market, they literally have to test the new drug that's being proposed against a placebo to make sure that the drug is actually effective and not just seeming effective due to the placebo effect. For example, let's just say you're trying to develop a new drug that helps people with stomach pain. Now, let's say for a study, you find 100 people that have frequent stomach pain. You divide this group into two smaller groups, a treatment group and a placebo group. All 50 people in the treatment group receive the actual medication you're testing, and all 50 people in the placebo group receive, well, a sugar pill, a placebo, a drug that does nothing. It's not even a drug. Now, here's the kicker. Everybody in this test is under the assumption that they are actually taking taking the active medicine. And after consistently taking the medicine for, let's say, a week, you have to review the results. And this is where the placebo effect actually comes into play. Because let's say after a week of taking the placebo, 25 out of the 50 people in the placebo group say that they noticed less stomach pain. That is kind of the benchmark that the treatment group has to surpass. Meaning that if the treatment group also reports a 25% decrease in stomach pain, it's actually not proven effective. In that case, it's about as effective as a placebo. For this medication for stomach pain to be proven effective, there has to be more people in the treatment group that feel better than people in the placebo group. And this oversimplified, poorly explained explanation is what's known as a double-blind placebo study. And it's kind of the gold standard for eliminating bias when it comes to testing brand new medications. Now here's the thing. With all of this being said, how does the placebo effect even work? And the answer is, we actually don't know that much about it. Researchers that have been studying the placebo effect from a psychological and neurological angle both kind of believe that this effect is linked to a brain's release of endorphins and other chemicals in the anticipation of a positive effect. Essentially meaning that because your body is expecting to feel better, it already kind of feels better in advance. But this isn't proven and is really only a going theory. And despite there being literally decades of study on the placebo effect up until this point, the exact mechanisms behind the placebo effect are completely unknown, making one of the staples of modern medicine testing an effective and life-saving mystery. The Twilight Zone. No, not that Twilight Zone, this Twilight Zone. Home of this, and this. The Twilight Zone is located 200 to 1,000 meters below the ocean surface. And it's known as the Twilight Zone because it is a region underwater where sunlight barely penetrates. It's too dark for any sort of photosynthesis, but it's not quite pitch black yet. And it's this unique region that is one of the least explored habitats on all of planet Earth. One notable resident of this area is the lanternfish, which is pretty cool, but also completely insane, and kind of goes to show how weird this area is. Like, we all know that jellyfish are like just weird creatures, but deep sea jellyfish are on a whole nother level. Like, I was just watching a documentary where some jellyfish literally asexually reproduce and basically just spawn new jellyfish, kind of like plants. And jellyfish as a whole are just kind of crazy entities. Like, they're alive, but they're not. It's just so wild. But that's not the mystery here. It has nothing to do with jellyfish per se. The Twilight Zone, like I mentioned, is one of the least explored areas, and for good reason too. The pressure that deep underwater is immense, and coupling that pressure with the sheer darkness and travel time and specialized equipment required to even navigate through this area makes any sort of Twilight Zone exploration extremely expensive and difficult. And because there's not really a major financial incentive to explore the Twilight Zone, research is definitely a bit slow. But not only is the Twilight Zone extremely harsh to get to and be in, but it's also extremely vast, making exploring and documenting it nearly impossible fully. And because the Twilight Zone is so massive, it's actually speculated that there may be more fish in the Twilight Zone alone than all other fish on the entire Earth combined. And while this is kind of a fruitless thought experiment, at this point, it's also extremely possible. But not only is it possible, it's a scary thought, because the fish that live in the Twilight Zone are completely weird looking, and probably the closest thing we have to aliens at this time. Like, these fish are literally creating their own light, which is kind of dope. I don't know, I think bioluminescence is just cool to begin with, but I also like to think that fish just got so fed up of being in the dark that they literally created their own organic light. But it's not just seeing cool fish that light up that makes the Twilight Zone interesting. It's also the impact that the Twilight Zone has on the Earth's climate, because the Twilight Zone is a massive ecosystem. And ocean and marine ecosystems specifically play a major role when it comes to carbon storage, which obviously has a direct impact on the Earth's climate, which definitely gives merit to wanting to explore the Twilight Zone more. But yeah, that's kind of all there is to say about it. The Twilight Zone is one of the most common ecosystems in all of the world, technically speaking, although it's one of the ecosystems we know the least about. And maybe that's for the better. Ball lightning. Admittedly, ball lightning isn't all that common, but lightning is relatively common. And I think most of us have heard about ball lightning, and honestly, I just thought it was cool and wanted to discuss this interesting phenomenon. Ball lightning sightings have gone back all the way to the 1600s and continue to be reported today. It's interesting because even today in 2025, we don't know a ton about ball lightning. So I can only imagine what they thought about ball lightning in the 1600s. Ironically, we do know what they thought about ball lightning in the 1800s, as there was a few recorded accounts of experiences with ball lightning, and they basically just described ball lightning as smelling like sulfur and being the work of the devil, which I think is fitting for the time period. In case you're unfamiliar, ball lightning is typically described by witnesses as a glowing, floating sphere of light, and like regular lightning, typically only appears during thunderstorms. Some people people have stated that these balls are only as small as a marble, while others have said that they've been multiple feet long and wide. And the colors that the ball lightning has been reported in is almost as vast as the size, with some people claiming that it was white, yellow, orange, or even blue. But in case ball lightning wasn't unpredictable enough, the way it behaves is also completely unpredictable. Ball lightning can last anywhere from a split second to multiple minutes long. And during the duration of its stay, it typically moves slowly through the air and can even pass through windows or walls, typically causing no damage whatsoever. And in some cases, ball lightning simply vanishes silently. And in other cases, it literally explodes with a loud bang. And already, ball lightning seems like one of the most amazing and also terrifying things you could witness in person. And I can only imagine what witnessing it would be like if you didn't know what ball lightning was. There's actually a video of a Belarusian train station that shows a ball of lightning crossing over all of the train tracks, and it's just amazing to see. And in the comments of this video, there's a ton of people talking about their experience with ball lightning and how the first time they saw it, they thought it was an angel or a ghost or something else that was typically supernatural, which I don't blame them for. If I just saw this thing in front of me in person, I would literally believe I was losing my mind or something really bad was happening. Like, I would not be in awe, I would be in terror. But that's just me. If I don't know about something, I typically lean towards being scared about it. But no matter how cool or interesting or terrifying ball lightning may seem, it's more mysterious than anything else. Obviously, scientists don't have a concrete answer on what ball lightning is or what even causes it. But there are a few interesting theories I'd like to share with you. A couple popular theories that try to explain why ball lightning happens include plasma, burning particles in the air, and even electromagnetic fields. And honestly, they're all kind of vague explanations and potentially could be partially true, but like I mentioned, we just don't know. And one of the biggest reasons why we don't know is because of how rare ball lightning is. It's almost impossible to replicate in a controlled environment, meaning that we're at the mercy of nature providing it to us to study it. And as you can imagine, ball lightning doesn't roll into a lot of labs all that often. And well-equipped scientists typically don't run into ball lightning all that often either, leaving a lot of the thought around ball lightning to be up to speculation and based off of reviewing videos posted online. And if you've made it this far in the video, let me know. If you saw ball lightning out in the wild, would you be terrified or would you be intrigued? I think the honest answer is both. And I guess while we're being honest, let me ask you, do you like watching Trust Me Bro videos? Because if you do, feel free to subscribe. We make videos every single week. Now, let's get on to the last section. Slime mold. Slime mold, or scientifically known as Physarum polycephalum, is not mold, nor slime, nor fungi. It's actually known as a protist. And what makes it unique is that it's actually a single-celled organism. That's right, this jelly-looking, goo-looking thing is actually one organism, although it is full of nuclei. That's right, it might be a single cell, but this one cell has so many nuclei within it. And all of these nuclei actually will come in handy later. Now you might be asking, what's the significance of this yellowy, greeny goo? And is it even common? I've never seen that. And let me answer both of those questions. First of all, is it common? Yeah. If you've gone on a walk in a forest after a rainy day, you have definitely walked past some sort of slime mold. And to answer your first hypothetical question, why does it matter? Well, slime molds are extremely intelligent. So intelligent, in fact, that we don't know how they're so smart or why they're so smart. And that is both interesting and terrifying. How smart is slime mold, you may ask? Well, slime molds have been shown time in and time out to solve mazes consistently. And how they do this is by basically filling up the entire maze with their gooey body. And once they find the exit of the maze, or in the case of the research test, finding the food, they will then retract everything else that isn't directly connecting the start of the slime mold to the food, allowing them to essentially reverse engineer the maze. And these mazes aren't simple either. Some studies have actually been able to have slime molds recreate major transportation networks, like the Tokyo subway system, for example. But not only can slime mold navigate to find food, they've also shown to have some sort of memory by anticipating reoccurring events. And how this is shown is by having them readjust their behavior based off of previous events that have happened in previous studies, proving that these single-celled organisms have some sort of memory even though they have not one neuron. That's right, slime molds have no brain, no nervous system, no complex organs, but they still seemingly can solve problems, make decisions, and even remember past events. And I'll be the first to say it, I'm impressed with this little ball of goo. And this little ball of goo might even be smarter than you. But if you think the ball of goo is not smaller than you, then for who the ball of goo is not smaller than you too? Okay, it is currently 1:53 a.m. and I thought that was funny. I didn't even think that was funny, I just said it. Regardless, the ways in which slime molds achieves any sort of intelligence to scientists is completely unclear. Although, like some of the other entries on this list, the scientists have their theories. And what's currently believed is that the network-like structure of neurons within the slime mold allows the slime mold to process information through chemical signals. essentially allowing it to have a brain without having a brain. And this method of thinking, or I guess thoughtlessness, on the slime mold's part has actually inspired scientists in specific fields like robotics and computing to try to use slime molds to find clues on how to build more efficient self-organizing systems, seeing as the slime mold's pretty good at doing that. And while there's not much more known about the slime mold's intelligence at this time, the fact that this single-celled organism can seemingly think without a brain has definitely inspired engineers and scientists alike. But for now, the mind of this little ball of goo is an enigma.